The military police didn't knock. They never do when they think they've already won. 4 MPs in full uniform pushed through the doors of the officers' club, hands on holsters, radios crackling, eyes locked on one target, a quiet woman standing alone near the memorial table, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of a photograph. She didn't run. She didn't even turn around. By the time the first officer grabbed her arm and spun her to face the room, every phone in the building was already recording. They thought they'd caught a fraud, a fake, a nobody dressed up in borrowed grief. They had no idea they were about to destroy their own careers. If this story already has your pulse up, stay with me until the end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Like, subscribe, and let's go. The memorial for Chief Petty Officer Daniel Rourke was supposed to be a quiet thing. That was what his family had requested. Nothing formal, no ceremony with folded flags and rifle salutes, no room full of dress uniforms performing grief on a schedule. Just people who had actually known him. People who remembered the sound of his laugh, or the specific way he swore when the coffee ran out on a long watch, or the look on his face the one time a mission went sideways in the kind of way that should have killed all of them but somehow didn't. The officers' club at Naval Station Coronado had been reserved for a Friday evening. The family arranged flowers, white, simple, and a small table near the back with framed photographs and a folded flag that the Navy had delivered 2 weeks earlier in a box that nobody wanted to open. By 7 o'clock, the room held about 60 people. Victoria Kane arrived at 7:14. She came through the side entrance, not the main doors. She wore dark civilian clothes, charcoal slacks, a plain navy blouse, flat shoes with worn soles. No rank insignia, no ribbons, nothing on her chest except a small, dull coin on a cord around her neck, tucked inside her collar where nobody would see it unless they were looking. She looked, to anyone who bothered to glance, like a middle school librarian who had wandered into the wrong building. She was 38 years old, 5'6", and moved with the kind of stillness that people sometimes mistake for shyness. Her hair was dark brown going gray at the temples, cut to jaw length, without any particular style. Her hands, if anyone had noticed, were not the hands of a librarian. The knuckles were flat and wide. A 2-inch scar ran diagonal across the back of her left hand, where something had once opened the skin cleanly, the kind of wound that closes with field dressing and tape, because there's no other option and no time for options anyway. She went to the photograph table first. She stood there for 2.5 minutes without speaking to anyone. She looked at the photos the way you look at something you already know by heart, not to gather information, but because looking is the only thing you can do when the other option is not looking, and not looking is unbearable. In one photograph, Daniel Rourke was maybe 26, grinning at a beach somewhere with his arm around 2 other men whose faces had been redacted with black rectangles. His eyes were the kind of eyes that look like they're already in on a joke nobody else has heard yet. Victoria pressed 2 fingers briefly against the edge of that frame. Then she stepped back, found a quiet corner near the wall, and stood there holding a glass of water she hadn't touched. That was when Lieutenant Commander Marcus Holt noticed her. Holt was 32, recently promoted, the kind of man who experienced authority as something that belonged to him by natural right rather than by anything he had done to earn it. He'd been drinking since 6:30. Nothing sloppy, just that particular loosening that makes a certain type of man feel sharper than he actually is. He'd been circling the room for an hour, working the social geography of the event, the way junior officers do when they want to be seen by senior officers without appearing to want to be seen. He noticed Victoria because she was alone, and alone people at memorial events are either grieving deeply or they don't belong. He decided she didn't belong. He crossed the room with 2 of his colleagues, Lieutenant Price, who laughed at whatever Holt said, and a taller officer whose name Victoria never caught, and he stopped in front of her with his drink in one hand and the expression of a man who has already decided how this conversation ends. "Don't think we've met," he said. "No," Victoria said. "We haven't." "You're here for the memorial?" "Yes." He looked her up and down. The look wasn't subtle. "You serve?" "I did." "What branch?" "Navy." Holt tilted his head, the tilt of a man doing math he's already decided the answer to. "What rate?" Victoria looked at him for a moment. "Hospital corpsman." "Huh." He said it like he'd expected exactly that and found it unsatisfying. And you knew Rourke how? We worked together. Where? She didn't answer that. The pause lasted about 3 seconds, which is a long time in a conversation like this one. Long enough for Holt to pull something out of it that wasn't there. Right. He nodded slowly, turning slightly toward Price. A lot of people tonight who worked with Danny and can't remember where. The air quotes in his voice were audible. Seen it before at these things. I'm sure you have, Victoria said. Listen. Holt stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but the kind of closeness that is designed to communicate size, rank, certainty. This event is for people who actually knew Chief Rourke, not for, he paused, doing that thing where the pause is the insult, fans, or whatever. Victoria turned and looked at the photograph table again. He hated the word chief, she said quietly. Wouldn't answer to it from anyone under 04. Called it a title for tugboat captains. She paused. And he took his coffee black, no sugar, but only because he was stubborn about it. He actually preferred it with sugar. He told me that in Djibouti in 2011 when we were stuck in a holding pattern for 11 days waiting on an asset that never showed. Silence. Price stopped smiling. Holt's jaw moved slightly without producing words. Djibouti, he repeated. Camp Lemonnier. August. The generator on the medical bay kept cycling out every 6 hours and we used the downtime to play cards. He cheated, badly, and cheerfully. She looked at Holt. I won anyway. Something shifted in the room, not dramatically. It wasn't a movie moment with swelling music. It was smaller and colder than that. A few people nearby had stopped their own conversations and were listening without appearing to listen. Holt reset. That's a nice story, he said, but anyone could know the name of a base. They could. What unit? Again, she didn't answer, and that was the thing that broke it open because Holt was now committed, and uncommitted men don't say what he said next in front of witnesses with their phones out. Committed men do. Men who have decided they're right, and the satisfaction of being publicly right is worth whatever the alternative might be. I'm going to ask you to leave, he said, louder now. This is a private event for people who served. You're wearing a dead man's tags around your neck, and you can't answer a single direct question about your own service record, and I think that's because you don't have one. The room went quiet enough that the ventilation system became audible. Victoria looked at him. She didn't flush. She didn't tear up. She didn't raise her voice or take a step backward. Her expression did something more unsettling than any of those things. It settled, like a person who has been in situations considerably worse than this one and has a very clear methodology for managing them. I'd like you to contact General Nathan Cross, she said. JSOC. If he's in country, his office will respond within the hour. Holt blinked. I'm not calling. I understand you're not going to do that, she said. I'm asking you to because it would resolve this quickly. Since you've apparently already made a decision, I want it on record that I offered the straightforward solution first. Someone near the back of the room laughed, a short, uncomfortable sound. Holt turned to the MPs who had been stationed at the door for the event, standard security for anything on base that drew a crowd. There were 2 of them, young, and they were already watching. Get her out, Holt said. Escorted removal. I want her credentialed or off base in 10 minutes. It was not technically within his authority to do that. The MPs didn't know that, or if they did, they made the calculation that a lieutenant commander's instruction was easier to follow than to debate in the middle of a memorial service. They moved toward her. Victoria set her water glass on the nearest flat surface, a side table near the wall, exactly where it would be out of the way. That small, deliberate courtesy in the middle of everything somehow made the whole thing worse to watch. She let them take her arms. She didn't resist, didn't brace, didn't make them work for it. She simply looked once back at the photograph table as they turned her toward the door. At Daniel Rourke's redacted photograph. At the grinning eyes of a man who had once cheated at cards in a medical bay in East Africa while a generator cycled out and the air smelled like dust and aviation fuel and nothing was fine, and somehow they were both still alive. Then she walked out. The room on the other side of the night was a security office 2 buildings over, a standard-issue space with institutional furniture, a table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, and a camera mounted high in the corner that blinked a slow red light. They cuffed her to the table with one wrist restrained. Standard procedure, they said, for an individual suspected of fraudulent entry to a restricted area, and left her there while Holt and two officers who had followed from the reception convened in the hallway to decide what they actually had. What they had, as best as any of them could articulate it, was a woman in civilian clothes who had attended a memorial under disputed circumstances, was wearing what appeared to be military dog tags she could not legally account for, and had declined to provide any verifiable service record information when directly questioned by a commissioned officer. None of that was, strictly speaking, a prosecutable crime. The Stolen Valor Act required actual fraudulent claims for tangible benefit. She hadn't claimed anything. She'd stated she served, stated her rating, and then declined to answer further. She invoked JSOC, one of the officers said. He was older than Holt, a commander named Weston, and he said it the way you say something that you've just noticed might be a problem. Cross his name specifically. Anyone can name a general, Holt said. Sure. Weston looked at the closed door of the security room. She said it like someone giving you the number for roadside assistance, not like someone hoping it works. Holt didn't have a response to that. Inside the security room, Victoria sat with her free hand flat on the table and looked at the wall. The wall had a safety poster on it, workplace hazard reporting, the kind of thing that exists in every institutional space and that nobody ever reads. She read it now, slowly and completely, not because it was interesting, but because her mind needed to be doing something that wasn't thinking about Daniel Rourke's photograph, and the reading gave it something to hold on to. 40 minutes passed. A duty JAG officer arrived. Lieutenant Ferris, young and a little out of breath, carrying a tablet she'd clearly been working off since she got the call. She sat down across from Victoria and pulled up a document. Ms. Kane, I'm Lieutenant Ferris, Judge Advocate General. I need to advise you of your rights under— I know my rights, Victoria said. Not unkindly, just efficiently. Ferris paused. Okay. Can I ask your branch of service? Navy. Years served? Victoria looked at her. I'm going to say something to you, and I need you to hear it as information rather than obstruction, because I'm trying to save both of us time. Ferris sat back slightly. My service record is classified at a level that you cannot access from this building or any unsecured terminal. My unit designation does not appear in any searchable DoD database. If you run my name through the standard separation record system, you will find either nothing or a placeholder file that is intentionally incomplete. She paused. I'm not telling you this to be difficult. I'm telling you this because it is the situation, and I would prefer you to go into whatever you do next with accurate information. Ferris stared at her. She stopped, started again. That's an unusual claim. I know. Can you provide any supporting documentation? Discharge papers, DD-214, anything? No. Why not? Victoria considered this for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she was deciding how much of the answer was worth giving to this particular room at this particular hour. Because the documentation that proves what I'm telling you is the same documentation that a classified program worked for 11 years to ensure could not be accessed by unauthorized personnel. She let that sit for a second. Which currently includes you. Ferris put her tablet face down on the table. Who is General Cross? She asked. JSOC, Victoria said. He'll know how to verify. He's on your chain of command? Was. Past tense? I'm not active duty. She looked at the single-cuffed wrist on the table. As you can probably tell. Ferris almost smiled at that. Almost. She stood, picked up her tablet, and went back into the hallway. Through the wall, Victoria could hear fragments of the conversation. Not full sentences, just the rhythm of argument, the specific cadence of people in uniform disagreeing in professional tones about something they would rather not be disagreeing about in a hallway at 9:30 on a Friday night. She caught Holt's voice once, clipped and certain. Standard procedure for anyone who won't cooperate, and Weston's, slower, called JSOC, Marcus. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And Ferris's, quieter than either. I don't know what to do with this. Victoria turned her free hand over on the table and looked at the scar across her left knuckles. In a certain light, it looked like a signature. The kind of mark a piece of shrapnel leaves when it crosses skin at an angle and keeps going because it has somewhere more important to be. She'd gotten it in a building that no longer existed in a country she was not supposed to have been in. The man who'd been next to her when it happened had been Daniel Rourke. He'd packed the wound with the gauze from his own kit, because hers was already open and deployed, pressed his hand against it for 4 minutes while they waited for exfil in the dark behind a collapsed wall, and told her a bad joke about a Navy doctor and an Air Force pilot to keep her talking. She couldn't remember the punchline. She'd been trying to remember it for 3 days since she'd gotten the call that he was gone. She pressed her thumb against the scar now. The door opened. Commander Weston came in alone this time. He sat down across from her and put both hands on the table and looked at her the way a man looks at a situation he has walked into without a map. "I need to ask you something," he said. "Okay. Is there anyone we should contact? Family, attorney?" "General Cross," she said. "That's the contact. We haven't been able to—" "I know it's late. Try again." Weston looked at the table. "The lieutenant commander who initiated this, Holt. He's got a few people from the memorial talking. I want you to know that this is being recorded, and anything said publicly about you tonight could have implications for—" "Commander?" Victoria looked at him steadily. "I understand what's happening. I've been in worse rooms than this one. I'm not going anywhere, and I don't need management. I need one phone call made to one number, and then this resolves." "You're remarkably calm," he said. "I know. That bothers some people. I know that too." He studied her, the scars on her forearms, 2 on the left, 3 on the right, the kind that come from things other than kitchen accidents. The hands, the stillness, something behind her eyes that wasn't coldness exactly, but was something adjacent to it. The particular flatness that develops in people who have spent a great deal of time in situations where emotion is a liability. "What were you doing at that memorial?" he asked. Not accusingly, genuinely. "Saying goodbye," she said. "Same as everyone else." Weston was quiet for a moment. "He was a friend?" "He was the man who held his hand on a wound in my arm for 4 minutes in the dark in a building I'm not supposed to have been in, and told me a joke I still can't remember the punchline to." She looked at the wall. "So, yes." Weston stood slowly. "I'm going to make that call," he said. "Thank you." He was almost to the door when she spoke again. "Commander?" He stopped. "The coin around my neck." She reached up with her free hand, found the cord, and pulled the coin from inside her collar. It came up dull and worn, a heavy challenge coin with markings on both faces that were not standard military issue, unusual geometric symbols on one side, a set of numerals and letters on the other that meant nothing without context, and would mean exactly everything to someone who had the context. "When General Cross calls back, show him this description. Series 7, black, 03 Alpha. He'll know." Weston looked at the coin for a long moment. His expression changed. Not dramatically. Not in any way that a camera across the room would have been able to clearly record. Just a small tightening around the eyes. The specific expression of a man who has just seen something and doesn't know what it means, but understands intuitively that it means something. "I'll pass that along," he said. He closed the door. Yan. At 10:47, the activity level in the building changed. Victoria felt it before she heard it. The shift in ambient sound that happens when a space goes from managed to urgent. The difference between institutional quiet and something else. Something with edges on it. Feet moving faster in the hallway. A radio crackling, clipped exchange. Too far away to catch words, but close enough to hear the register. The flat, careful language of people being professionally careful about what they say in range of walls. A door opening and closing. Then another. Then voices, lower, the way voices go when people are trying to talk quietly and failing because the situation is making it difficult. Victoria sat with her cuffed wrist on the table and her free hand in her lap and breathed evenly through her nose. The door to her room opened at 10:53. Lieutenant Ferris came in first, and something about her face was different. The professional neutrality she'd carried in earlier was still there, but it was working harder now, maintaining itself against something underneath it that was pulling the other way. She uncuffed Victoria's wrist without speaking. Victoria rubbed the wrist once, habit, and waited. Ferris said, "There's someone here to see you." "All right." "He came." Ferris stopped, tried again. "He drove from San Diego, directly, when we called." Victoria stood up. In the hallway outside, she could hear the quality of the silence that a room makes when someone very specific has entered it. The particular stillness of people who know, instinctively, that whatever they were just doing and saying should stop. She walked to the door, opened it. The hallway was full of people, officers, the MPs from earlier, Weston, Holt, several others she didn't recognize, and they were all standing, not loosely, not casually, but upright, in that specific physical configuration that a person's body makes when authority that supersedes anything in the room has just walked into it. At the far end of the hallway stood a man in his early 60s, silver-haired, in civilian clothes, dark jacket, open collar, which somehow made the authority around him more pronounced rather than less. He wore no insignia. He didn't need to. General Nathan Cross looked down the hallway at the woman standing in the doorway of the security room. For 4 seconds, nobody moved or spoke. Then Cross came to attention. It was precise, complete. The kind of attention that someone with 40 years of muscle memory does without theater, which is exactly why it was devastating to watch. Not performed, just done, the way breathing is done. He raised his hand to his brow, held it. "Operator Kane," he said. The sound that went through the hallway was not exactly sound. It was the absence of sound, followed immediately by the sound of a room rearranging its understanding of what it has just spent the last 3 hours doing. Marcus Holt was standing 6 feet to Victoria's left. She didn't look at him. She looked at Nathan Cross, and something in her face moved. Not much, and not for long, but it was there. The first crack in the stillness since she'd walked into that memorial and stood at Daniel Rourke's photograph table with her fingers at the edge of the frame. Cross lowered his salute. "I'm sorry about Rourke," he said. "Yes, sir," she said. "Me too." In the silence that followed, someone's radio made a small sound and was immediately silenced. A fluorescent light above them buzzed once and went quiet. Marcus Holt stood very still. He was beginning to understand in the specific and irreversible way that understanding sometimes arrives what he had done. Not what he'd thought he was doing, what he had actually done. And the distance between those two things was the distance between the career he'd had 3 hours ago and whatever came after tonight. Victoria looked at the hallway full of people who had spent the evening certain about her. She did not smile. She did not say anything. She simply stood there in the buzzing light while Nathan Cross waited, and the room held the specific, awful weight of a truth that had arrived too late to undo anything. Nobody moved for a long moment after Cross lowered his salute. The hallway held them all in it, the officers, the MPs, Weston with his hands at his sides, Ferris with her tablet pressed flat against her chest, held them the way a room holds people who have just understood something they cannot ununderstand. The fluorescent light above the security room door buzzed its slow, indifferent buzz. Someone's radio clicked twice, static, nothing, and went silent again. Marcus Holt had not moved in 40 seconds. Victoria was aware of him the way you become aware of something peripheral when your main focus is elsewhere. Present in the edge of her vision, very still and very quiet in the specific way that a man goes quiet when the full shape of a mistake has just presented itself to him without mercy or gradation. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at Nathan Cross, who had crossed the distance of the hallway in a few measured strides, and now stood close enough that she could see the lines in his face, deeper than the last time she'd seen him, which had been 3 years ago in a debriefing room that smelled like recycled air and burnt coffee and the particular exhaustion of a mission that had cost more than anyone planned. "You drove yourself?" she said. "Brubaker's got the weekend," Cross said, his aide. "I didn't want to wait for the pool car." "You're in civilian clothes." "I was at my daughter's recital." He said it simply, without self-pity, the way a man states a fact about a thing he gave up that he has made his peace with, mostly. "She plays the cello, badly, but with genuine commitment." Victoria almost said something, didn't. Cross looked past her, briefly, at the security room she'd just come out of. At the single chair, the table with the bolt, the red blinking camera in the corner. His expression didn't change in any dramatic way, but something behind his eyes moved. A short, internal adjustment, the kind that experienced people make when a situation confirms something they suspected and the confirmation is worse than the suspicion. "How long were you in there?" he said. "About 3 hours. They feed you anything?" "No." He turned, not at anyone specific, at the general population of the hallway. The assembled officers and MPs and people who had spent the evening absolutely certain they were correct about something. "Someone get her water and whatever food is available," Cross said. Not loud, not angry, the kind of voice that has never needed volume because the alternative to doing what it says has never presented itself as a viable option to anyone within range. Somebody moved immediately. Cross looked at Weston. "Commander?" "Sir?" "I want to speak with your JAG officer and the officer who initiated the removal." He paused. "In that order. And I want somewhere to sit that isn't a hallway." Weston said, "Yes, sir," and turned to make it happen. Cross looked back at Victoria. "Can you walk?" "I've been sitting," she said. "I'm not injured." "That's not what I meant." She understood what he meant. He meant, "Are you all right?" He meant it in the specific, abbreviated way that people mean it when they have spent enough time in each other's company that the long version is unnecessary. "I'm all right," she said. He nodded once, the nod of a man who is filing that away but reserving judgment. "Then let's find a room." They put them in a conference space at the end of the corridor, a standard issue room with a rectangular table, 6 chairs, a whiteboard with marker traces from previous meetings still ghosting the surface. Water appeared, as ordered, and a plate of items from the officers' club kitchen that were technically food: crackers, 2 kinds of cheese, something in a small bowl that might have been hummus. Victoria ate 3 crackers without ceremony, while Cross sat across from her and Ferris sat up at the far end of the table with her tablet and the expression of someone who has just been informed that the ground beneath her feet is a different altitude than she thought. Holt was the last one in. He came through the door with the specific physical posture of a man who has calculated, in the 30 seconds since he was told to report, that he can manage this if he manages it correctly. That there is a version of this conversation where the architecture of the evening is rearranged into something survivable. He was still performing the geometry of confidence, shoulders back, chin level, but the performance had a seam in it now, a visible place where it was working too hard. He sat. Didn't look at Victoria. Cross let the silence run for a moment. He was good at silence, better than most people in uniform who are trained to fill it. "Lieutenant Commander Holt," he said finally. "Sir." "Walk me through tonight." Holt walked him through it. Victoria listened without reaction. He was precise and sequenced and chose his words with the particular care of a man constructing a record in real time, not lying exactly, but framing, shaping, applying the professional language of incident documentation to a series of actions whose actual texture was considerably less professional. He said, "Individual could not verify service claims." He said, "Individual declined to cooperate with direct questioning." He said, "Given the sensitive nature of the event, I made the determination that removal was the appropriate response pending verification." He did not say, "I called her a fraud" in front of 60 people while their cameras were recording. He did not say, "I was 3 drinks into the evening and had already made my decision before she spoke a word." He did not say, "She told me to contact you, specifically, and I dismissed it." Cross listened, didn't write anything, didn't nod or react. He had the stillness of a man who has heard a great many briefs and knows exactly how to wait for one to reach the place where it stops being about what's being said and becomes about what isn't. When Holt finished, Cross was quiet for 4 seconds. "She asked you to contact my office," Cross said. "Sir, at the time..." "That wasn't a question." Cross turned to Ferris. "Lieutenant?" Ferris straightened. "Sir, at any point in the 3 hours Miss Kane was in that room, did anyone attempt to reach the contact she specified?" Ferris's pause was brief but complete. "We made an attempt at approximately 21:40, sir. When we didn't reach an immediate duty officer, Commander Weston..." "One attempt," Cross said. "Yes, sir." Cross looked at the table. He looked at it the way a man looks at something when the alternative is looking at the people responsible for the thing he's looking away from. A technique, an old one. "All right," he said, and that was all. He turned to Victoria. "I need to ask you some questions, for the record." "I know." "Were you at this event in any official capacity?" "No." "You attended as a civilian of your own accord to pay respects to a former colleague?" Yes. Did you misrepresent your identity or service history to anyone in attendance this evening? No. Did you claim rank, medals, or benefits of any kind to which you were not entitled? No. Cross looked at Ferris. For the record, Ms. Kane's service history, rank designations, and operational assignments are classified at a level above what this station can access or adjudicate. No determination of fraudulent representation can be made by this command or any subordinate authority. Any record of the accusation generated tonight will reflect that. Ferris typed without speaking. Holt sat very still. Additionally, Cross continued in the same even tone, the challenge coin Ms. Kane carries is a verified operational token from a program I am not going to name in this room. Its description was relayed to me correctly through Commander Weston, and it is sufficient verification of her status for any purpose this command might require. He paused. Are we clear? Yes, sir, said everyone in the room, including Holt, whose voice came out approximately half the volume of everyone else's. They let her sit in the conference room while Cross moved into a series of conversations Victoria was not invited to, and did not need to be. She could trace the shape of them from here. The structure was predictable, not because she was cynical about institutions. She had more complicated feelings about institutions than cynicism could account for, but because she knew how this architecture worked. Who talked to whom, in what order, with what words, and what those words set in motion. Weston would be talked to first. He'd been reasonable, as these things went, had made the call, had tried, had arrived at the discomfort of uncertainty faster than most people in his position would have. That would be noted. Ferris would be coached on the documentation. The record of this evening needed to be accurate without being more than accurate. There was a distinction there that mattered legally and professionally and would take a careful hand to manage. Holt would be last. Victoria ate another cracker. Looked at the whiteboard with its ghost marks of previous meetings. Someone had written readiness metrics and then erased it imperfectly, so the word readiness was still faintly legible, more shadow than text. She thought about Daniel Rourke. She thought about the photograph in the officers' club, the redacted faces, the beach somewhere, his grin that had looked like he was already ahead of the punchline. She thought about the 11 days in Djibouti and the way the heat there was a different texture than any other heat she'd been in, thick and personal, like the air had opinions about you. She thought about the joke she still couldn't remember. She was going to have to ask someone who'd known him, someone who'd been around long enough to have the archive of him, the small inventory of specific memories that the people who loved a person carry. She didn't know if any of those people were still reachable. Their world had not been a world that made it easy to stay in contact, for obvious reasons. The door opened at 11:43. It was not Cross. It was a woman Victoria didn't recognize, late 40s, civilian clothes, the kind of face that has navigated a great deal without softening about it. She carried 2 cups of real coffee and set one in front of Victoria without asking and sat down in the chair across from her. You don't know me, the woman said. Not an apology, just a fact being established. No, my name is Jillian Marsh. I'm with Naval Criminal Investigative Service. She paused. I've been on base for a separate matter, and Commander Weston asked me to sit with you while General Cross finishes up. Victoria looked at the coffee. It was real. Not the standard issue institutional kind, but something from an actual machine, dark and slightly bitter in a way that indicated beans rather than powder. He sent you to babysit me, Victoria said. He sent me to make sure you had decent coffee and someone to talk to who wasn't wearing a rank insignia. Marsh sat back. But if it helps, I was listening from the hallway for about 40 minutes before that, so I know roughly what happened. And Holt's going to have a very interesting week. Marsh wrapped both hands around her cup. I'm not going to pretend this is a social call. I have questions. I assumed. You can decline to answer any of them. I know. Marsh looked at her directly. Not with aggression, not with the evaluative quality of someone building a case, with the specific, careful attention of a person who is genuinely trying to understand something. What made you stay in the room that long? You clearly knew what was going to happen when Cross arrived. You could have pushed harder at any point. Weston was uncertain from the first hour. Ferris was uncertain before that. You had leverage you didn't use. Victoria looked at the coffee. I was at a memorial, she said. I wasn't going to spend it arguing about my service record in a hallway.
You were in a security room in handcuffs. I know where I was. Marsh was quiet for a moment. Fair enough, she said. Outside the window, there was a single window in the room, narrow, looking out onto a service road between buildings. A vehicle moved slowly past. Headlights. Then dark again. Can I ask you something? Victoria said.
Marsh looked faintly surprised,
Not at the question, but at the direction of it.
Sure.
The people who were recording tonight, at the memorial, you said you were listening from the hallway, which means you've been briefed on the situation.
She looked at Marsh steadily.
How many cameras were on when Holt had me removed?
Marsh set her cup down.
Based on what Weston described.
She thought about it.
At least 15, maybe more. It was a reception. People had phones.
And those recordings will circulate.
Probably.
Marsh paused. Actually, almost certainly. A couple of people had already posted before the situation was contained. Weston's team is working on it, but you can't uncirculate something once it's moving.
Victoria nodded slowly. This was the thing she'd known was coming from the moment the first phone came up in that reception room.
It wasn't the accusation that mattered, not in the long run. It wasn't what happened in this building tonight. It was the 15-second clip of a woman in civilian clothes being escorted out of a memorial by MPs, while a lieutenant commander addressed the room, the clip without context or footnote or explanation, the clip that would be seen by people who had no access to what came before or after it. It would make the rounds. It would be watched by people who would form complete and confident opinions based on it. That was how it worked. That was how it had always worked, in every era and every medium, and the mechanism didn't care about accuracy or fairness, or what General Nathan Cross said in a conference room at 11:43 at night.
What are you thinking about? Marsh asked.
Nothing actionable, Victoria said.
Marsh studied her. You know, most people who just got cleared after 3 hours in a security room are either very relieved or very angry. You're neither.
I'm tired, Victoria said.
That's it? Victoria looked at the ghost mark on the whiteboard. Readiness, half erased, still there.
I came here to say goodbye to someone, she said.
I didn't finish.
Everything else tonight is just noise around that. Cross came back at 12:17. He came in alone, sat down, put both hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment, the way he sometimes did when he was organizing a sequence of information that he needed to deliver in the right order. You're free to go, he said. Technically, you've been free to go since I got here, but I wanted to make sure the paperwork caught up before you left the building.
Okay.
Holt has been relieved of his duty assignment pending a formal review. That process will take approximately 6 to 8 weeks, and I can't tell you more than that.
I didn't ask.
I know. He looked at her. I'm telling you anyway because you were owed the courtesy of knowing it, and also because I want to be transparent with you about what this evening is likely to generate administratively.
Victoria waited.
There's going to be an inquiry, Cross said. Low-level, standard. The recordings that circulated will necessitate some kind of official response from this command, and that response will likely involve a brief mention of the circumstances being misrepresented by initial accounts. He paused. Your name won't be in it. Your service record won't be in it, but the shape of the incident will be documented. All right? Is there anything you need from me tonight? Practically speaking, she thought about it honestly, which was something he'd always appreciated about her, that she didn't reflexively say no when offered help, that she ran the actual inventory before answering. A car to a hotel, she said. I didn't drive. I came by base transit. Done. He pulled out his phone, sent a message in 3 seconds, put it back. 20 minutes. Thank you. He nodded. They sat in the quiet of the conference room for a moment, not uncomfortably. Cross had been one of 3 or 4 people in Victoria's professional life with whom silence was not a thing that needed filling. The memorial, he said. Were you able to? No. She looked at the table. Not really. He was quiet. I couldn't remember his joke, she said. The one he used to tell in the field. About the Navy doctor. I've been trying to remember it for 3 days, and I can't get the ending. Cross was very still. I don't know the one, he said. Nobody remembers the last joke, Victoria said. Not bitterly. Just as a statement of fact, the kind of thing you say when you've had enough time with loss to know its specific geography. That's the problem. Everything else about a person you can inventory, the job they did, the things they said,
the way they made decisions, but the last joke is always the one you can't hold on to. Cross looked at his hands. He was a good operator, he said. One of the best I worked with in 15 years of this. I know. He thought very highly of you. I know that too. She looked up. He told me once, in Djibouti, he was terrible at subtlety, Danny. He'd just say the thing. Cross almost smiled. You should go back, he said, to the memorial. Tomorrow, or whenever the family will have people again. Finish it properly. I don't know if that's Victoria. He rarely used her name without rank attached. It was notable when he did. Go back. Finish it. She looked at him. Yes, sir, she said. The car they sent was a plain sedan, an E4 driving who was professional and silent and kept the radio off without being asked. Victoria sat in the back and watched the base perimeter go past. The lit-up fence line, the guardhouse. The transition from military infrastructure to civilian road that happened in the space of 50 yards and always felt to her like stepping through two different kinds of air. She had a room at a Marriott 12 minutes from the base. Not a fancy room. She didn't book fancy rooms on habit, even now, even when the reason for the habit no longer applied. A double bed, a work desk, a bathroom with adequate lighting. That was the inventory. That was enough. She looked out the window. Her phone had 14 notifications. She hadn't checked it in 4 hours and didn't check it now. She could reconstruct their general content without reading them. The memorial attendees who had her number, the handful of people from her past life who monitored specific channels, and would have seen something moving through social media tonight and known, from context or from the specific shape of the incident, that it was her. One notification was from a number she didn't recognize. She noticed it only because of the timestamp, 11:48, which was while she was still in the conference room, which meant whoever it was had moved quickly. She didn't open it. The car pulled up to the Marriott at 12:41. She thanked the driver. He nodded, didn't speak, and went through the automatic doors into the lobby. There was a couple at the front desk, checking in late with the specific frayed patience of people who have been traveling since early morning. A night shift clerk behind the counter, doing the work with the practiced automaticity of someone 4 hours into a shift with 4 more to go. Victoria went past them to the elevator. She was waiting for it, standing, watching the numbers, when she heard her name, not loudly, not so loud that the couple at the desk could have heard it, pitched just above silence, the way you pitch a voice when you want it to reach one specific person and no one else. She turned around. The man standing 20 feet away in the lobby was one she hadn't seen in 2 years. He was in civilian clothes, jeans, dark jacket, and he looked like he'd come a distance to get here, the particular worn quality of someone in the third segment of a long day. He was maybe 45, lean, with the kind of face that had started as handsome and been worked on by weather and time into something more interesting than handsome. She knew him. His name was Garrett Lyons. He had been, for approximately 3 years, in a different chapter of her life. The kind of person that the operational world categorizes with words that don't quite capture the texture of the actual thing. Her partner on 4 deployments, her handler on 2 more. The person who had once, in a parking structure in Frankfurt, talked her out of a decision she would have regretted with a single sentence that she still thought about sometimes. He had no reason to be in San Diego, which meant he had a very specific reason to be in San Diego. Victoria looked at him. You saw the footage, she said. 40 minutes ago, Garrett said. I was in Phoenix. He paused. I drove. That's 2 hours. 2 hours and change. He took a step forward, stopped. Something in his face moved. Are you actually all right? I already told Cross I was all right. I know. That's why I drove 2 hours. He looked at her. You tell Cross what you need to tell him. She looked at him for a long moment. The elevator behind her arrived. The doors opened, waited, slid closed again. How did you know what hotel? She said. The same way I knew where you were 2 years ago when your phone was off for 6 weeks. He said it without drama, factual. I pay attention. Victoria turned and pressed the elevator button again. Come up, she said. I'll order room service. It's almost 1 in the morning. I know, I haven't eaten since noon. He followed her to the elevator. They stood side by side waiting for it, and the lobby was quiet around them.
The couple at the desk receiving their key cards, the night shift clerk already turning back to something on his screen, the whole hotel doing the slow, specific breathing of a building in the middle of the night. "You look tired," Garrett said. "I am tired." Like actually tired, or the thing where you say you're tired because you don't want to say the other thing. She looked at the elevator numbers. "Both," she said. The doors opened. They got in. The lobby disappeared behind them as the doors closed, and for a moment the elevator was just the two of them and their reflections in the mirror panel and the low hum of the cable doing its work. "Cross said Holt's getting reviewed," Garrett said. "That's what he told me. That'll take months and end in a slap." "Probably. Does that bother you?" Victoria thought about this seriously, the way she tried to think about things that had the potential to damage her if she got the answer wrong in either direction. "I didn't come here for Holt," she said. "I came here for Danny. Whatever happens to Holt is someone else's accounting." Garrett looked at her profile in the mirror. "You ever going to finish grieving someone the normal way?" he said. "Like the way where you feel it instead of managing it?" The elevator opened on the 4th floor. "I'm working on it," Victoria said. She stepped out. He followed. They went down the corridor to her room in silence, and the carpet absorbed their footsteps, and the ceiling lights were the particular amber of hotel corridors at 1 a.m, and somewhere in the building a door closed, and somewhere else an ice machine cycled on, and the ordinary sounds of a building full of sleeping strangers went on around them, indifferent and continuous, the way ordinary life does. She got the room door open on the 2nd try. The keycard reader had the particular hesitation of a system that was overdue for maintenance, and pushed it open and stepped inside. She put her bag on the desk, picked up the hotel phone to order food, and then stopped. Because her phone, her personal phone, which she'd been avoiding for 4 hours, had lit up on the surface of the desk where she'd set it, and the screen showed the number she'd noticed earlier, the unknown caller from 1148, and this time she could see that it wasn't a missed call. It was a text message, 4 words. She stood in the doorway between the small entry hall and the main room, holding the hotel phone, and she read the 4 words on the screen. Behind her, Garrett said, "What is it?" She didn't answer immediately. The 4 words on her phone screen were, "We need to talk." Underneath them, no signature, no additional context. But there was a second message, sent 3 minutes after the first, that she hadn't seen because she hadn't opened the thread. The second message was a photograph. She looked at the photograph for a long time without speaking, long enough that Garrett crossed the room and looked over her shoulder at the screen. She heard him exhale once, short and controlled. The photograph was of her, taken tonight, in the officers' club before any of it started, while she was standing alone at the photograph table with her fingers at the edge of Daniel Rourke's frame. Taken from a distance, from an angle that suggested the shooter had not been standing in the room, had been outside it, through the window, with something better than a phone camera. Someone had known she was going to be there. Someone had been watching from before the beginning, and they had waited until now, until after the MPs and the security room and General Cross and all of it, to reach out. Victoria set the hotel phone down. "Garrett," she said. "Yeah," he said. He was already reading it the same way she was. "You drove from Phoenix tonight." "Yes." "What were you doing in Phoenix?" He didn't answer immediately. That was the answer. She turned and looked at him. His face was doing the thing it did when he was deciding how much of a thing to say and in what sequence. She knew the face. She had 3 years of the face. It was the expression of a man who has information that he is about to share, but is organizing the sharing carefully because the information has weight, and he knows it. "Tell me," she said. He sat down on the edge of the bed, ran one hand over the back of his neck, looked at her. "There's something else going on," he said. "Something that started before tonight, before Rourke." He paused. "I came because of the footage. That's true. But I also came because I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. My number hasn't changed." "I know." He looked at the phone in her hand. "I didn't want to use it." The room held the weight of that for a moment. "Who took that photo?" she said. "I don't know who specifically," Garrett said, "but I know what it's connected to." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, and looked at her with the specific, careful attention of someone delivering news to a person they know can handle it, but would prefer not to have to. "The unit's being looked at, Victoria.
Not officially, not through any channel that'll show up in a report, but someone is going back through the operational archive and they're pulling threads. He paused.
And 2 of those threads have your name on them. The ice machine down the corridor cycled on again.
Victoria sat down in the desk chair. She looked at the photograph on her phone. Herself. At the memorial table, touching the edge of Danny Rourke's frame, taken from outside the window, from the dark. She had been in that room saying goodbye, and someone in the dark had been pointing a camera at her.
Who?
She said. Quiet, flat, the word a shape with very little air in it. Garrett shook his head.
That's what I haven't been able to get to yet, he said. But whoever it is, they've been at this for a while. He met her eyes. And tonight wasn't random. The footage going up, the attention, the whole thing. I don't know if Holt is connected or if he's just a coincidence that happened to be useful. He paused. But someone wanted eyes on you tonight. Victoria looked at the 4 words on her screen. We need to talk. She turned her phone face down on the desk. Order the food, she said. We're going to be here a while. Garrett ordered a club sandwich and soup he didn't touch. Victoria ordered coffee, black, and a side of toast that she ate methodically while Garrett laid out what he knew on the desk between them. Not documents, not files, because he hadn't brought files, but the shape of it rendered in the specific verbal shorthand of 2 people who had spent years speaking a language that had no civilian translation. The room service arrived at 1:17. The kid who brought it was maybe 20, barely looking at them, just doing the work of the card and the receipt and the pen, and then gone. And the door clicked shut behind him, and they were alone again with the food and the lamp and the phone face down on the desk. Garrett talked. Victoria listened. What he knew, assembled. 4 weeks ago, a contractor working for a defense analysis firm in Alexandria had flagged anomalies in a declassification review. Standard stuff on its surface. Routine archive processing, the government's ongoing project of deciding what was old enough and cold enough to be sanitized and released. But the anomalies weren't in the material being released. They were in the access logs of the material being reviewed. Someone had been pulling files from the operational archive at a rate and with a specificity that didn't match standard declassification workflow. The files being pulled were not random. They were organized around a particular operational window, 31 months beginning in late 2009, covering a specific geographic theater. The unit that operated in that window during that time was not named in any searchable record. Its mission logs were filed under a code designation that had been retired and overwritten twice since the unit disbanded. But someone knew the code, and someone was pulling everything connected to it. How did you get this? Victoria said. The contractor flagged it to someone who flagged it to someone who called me. That's a long chain. It's a careful chain. Garrett looked at his soup. The contractor's good. She noticed because the access pattern looked like research, not review, someone building a picture. Of the unit. Of specific people in the unit. Victoria wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. How many names? She said. She could identify 6 pulls that mapped to individual personnel files. 3 of them are current active duty. He paused. 2 are retired. And 1. He looked at her. Your file is the oldest pull, he said. First access was 6 weeks ago. She calculated back. 6 weeks ago was 3 weeks before Danny Rourke died. Rourke, she said. His file was accessed 4 weeks ago. Garrett sat back. 5 days after he went into the hospital. The room was very quiet. Someone on another floor had a television on. She could feel the bass vibration of it, too low to identify the sound, just the rhythmic pulse of something being broadcast into a room where someone couldn't sleep, or didn't want to. The hospital, Victoria said. It was listed as a training accident. That's what the official report says. She looked at him. He looked back. They had known each other long enough that certain conversations could be conducted entirely in the quality of a look, its duration, its depth, the specific kind of stillness that surrounded it. This look lasted about 5 seconds and covered a significant amount of ground. I don't know, Garrett said. I'm not saying I know. I'm saying the timing is a coincidence I don't like. What kind of training accident? Blunt force. Fall during a land navigation exercise. He said it carefully. the way you say something when the words themselves are functional, and you're not going to let them be anything else right now. He was alone on the course. Nobody witnessed it. Victoria set her coffee down. She picked up her phone. The screen lit. The 4 words were still there. We need to talk. She looked at the photograph beneath them. Herself at the memorial table, the redacted photograph, her fingers at the edge of the frame. They were watching me at the memorial, she said. Yes. Which means they knew I'd be there. Yes. Which means they either had access to communication I used to plan the trip, or someone inside the family's planning told them. Or, Garrett said carefully, they knew you well enough to know you would go. She thought about that. She thought about the specific narrow category of people who knew her well enough to predict her attendance at a private memorial for a classified operator whose death would not appear in any public record. That category was not large. It had precisely the profile of people who also had access to the operational archive. Someone from the unit, she said. That's where I keep landing, Garrett said. Or someone who had access to the unit's internal information. Same landing. She stood up. Not agitated, just the kind of standing up that happens when a mind needs the body to change its configuration. She walked to the window. The service road outside was empty at this hour, lit by 2 evenly spaced lamps, the asphalt dark from an earlier rain she hadn't noticed. The message, she said. Who sent it? I don't know the number. I know you don't. She turned. I need you to find out. I have someone who can run it. He pulled out his own phone, the old one. She noticed it was a different model than the one he'd been using when she saw him in Frankfurt 2 years ago, which meant he'd cycled again, which meant he'd been in territory that warranted cycling, which told her something additional about the last 2 years of his life that he hadn't mentioned. Give me 24 hours. I need 12. 15. Fine. He nodded, sent a message, put the phone away. Victoria stayed at the window. The empty road. The 2 lamps making their small, separate pools of light on the wet asphalt. Garrett? Yeah. If someone is going through the archive, building a picture, what are they building it toward? He was quiet for a moment, and the quality of the quiet told her he'd been asking himself the same question and hadn't liked any of the answers. Could be exposure, he said. There are people who would pay for that material, on multiple sides. Could be. Could be internal, he said. Someone with a grievance. Someone who lost something connected to those operations and wants accountability. Could be. Could be institutional, he said. Someone running a program that looks like one thing and is another thing. Pick one, she said. He looked at her. I can't yet, he said. That's why I needed to get to you before whoever it is got to you first. She turned back to the window. She said, Danny Rourke knew something. I think so too. He died 5 days after his file was accessed. Yes. And now someone wants to talk to me. Yes. She pressed 2 fingers against the glass. Cold on the other side. The road, the lamps, the wet asphalt reflecting nothing. Go to sleep, she said. Take the chair. I'm not asking you to drive back to Phoenix at 2 a.m. What are you going to do? Think, she said. Go to sleep, Garrett. She did not sleep. She sat in the desk chair with the lamp on low and thought in the slow, systematic way she'd learned to think in situations that had more variables than immediate answers, not pushing toward a conclusion, just organizing the terrain, identifying what was solid and what was uncertain and what she genuinely did not know and needed to stop treating as if she did. What was solid? Someone had accessed the operational archive. Someone had pulled files connected to the unit. Danny Rourke's file had been pulled 5 days before his death. Her file had been pulled 6 weeks ago. She had been photographed at the memorial without her knowledge. Someone had messaged her within 48 minutes of the photograph being taken. What was uncertain? Whether Rourke's death was an accident. Whether the archive access was a single actor or multiple. Whether Holt's accusation tonight was opportunistic or engineered. Whether the message sender was a threat or something else entirely. What she genuinely did not know. Who? Why now? What they wanted. She organized these things in her mind the way she used to organize a threat assessment before a breach. The same discipline. The same refusal to let urgency corrupt the sorting process. Urgency corrupted sorting. She'd learned that the hard way in a building in a country she wasn't supposed to be in, lying behind a collapsed wall with her hand wrapped in field dressing, waiting for exfil, and wanting so badly for the situation to resolve itself into clarity that she'd almost moved too early. Danny had put his hand on her arm and said, "Wait. One word, no explanation, no reassurance, no qualifier, just wait." She had waited. Exfil had come 4 minutes later from a direction she hadn't expected. She pressed her thumb against the scar on her hand. At 4:12, she picked up her phone and opened the message thread. She typed, "I know you were at the memorial. Who are you?" Not a question mark, a statement with an implied demand. She sent it and put the phone face up on the desk and waited. The response came in 6 minutes, which was both faster and slower than she'd expected. Faster because 6 minutes at 4 in the morning meant whoever it was had been awake and watching the thread. Slower because 6 minutes was enough time to compose something carefully. The message said, "Someone who served in your unit. You don't know me by face. I was post-2012. I know what's happening with the archive, and I know why. I need to meet." Victoria read it 3 times. Post-2012 meant the unit had continued after she separated. She'd known that in the abstract, the way you know things you're not supposed to ask about specifically. The unit didn't stop because personnel cycled out. She typed, "Why a photo? Why tonight? 6 more minutes. Needed to confirm you'd be there before I committed to contact." The memorial was listed in a private network connected to the team. If you came, it meant you were still reachable. If you didn't come, it meant you'd already been warned off or compromised. She stared at that. Then she typed, "Rourke." Was it an accident? The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again, stopped. Then, no. One word. She put the phone down on the desk. In the chair across the room, Garrett was asleep, or performing sleep with the stillness of someone who had trained both. His jacket pulled over his shoulder, his head angled against the high back of the chair. She looked at the phone. She looked at Garrett. She made a decision. She wrote, "Coronado. Tomorrow, 900. The boardwalk, east of the Hotel Del. Come alone." The response was immediate this time. Just, yes. But she let Garrett sleep until 7:30. He came awake the way field-trained people come awake. Not gradually, not through stages, but all at once and fully oriented, the way a light comes on, the eyes open and the brain already running. She was sitting on the edge of the bed with 2 cups of coffee from the room machine, and she handed him one and said, "I made contact." He took the cup. Didn't ask how she'd been in the chair an hour ago and was now on the bed with information. Just said, "And?" She told him. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things she had always valued about him, the genuine capacity to receive information without immediately trying to reshape it. When she finished, he said, "Post-2012. That's what they said. Young then. Maybe 30, 32. And they confirmed Rourke. One word, no elaboration." Garrett held the coffee cup in both hands and looked at the window. The early morning light was coming through the gap in the curtain. Not warm light, marine layer light, the gray-white kind that the coast does in the mornings, and that she had always found steadying rather than bleak. She didn't know exactly why. "You're meeting them," he said. "Yes. Boardwalk. Open space, public, multiple exit routes." She looked at him. "I'm not walking into a room with someone I don't know." "I'll be there." "Not visibly." He looked at her. "Victoria's not visibly," she said again. Flat. Specific. The tone that meant the conversation about that particular point was complete. "I need them to trust me enough to give me actual information. That requires me showing up alone. And if they're not what they claim, then I'll manage it, and you'll be on the boardwalk." He set his coffee down, rubbed his face with both hands, the gesture of a man acknowledging that the decision has been made and his role now is logistics rather than debate. "Fine," he said. "What time do you want me there?" 8:40. East End near the volleyball courts. Don't wear the jacket." "What's wrong with my jacket?" "You look like someone trying not to look like something in that jacket." She stood. "Wear the gray one." He looked at her. "I don't have the gray one," he said. "I drove from Phoenix at midnight." "Then buy one." She picked up her phone. "You've got 90 minutes. The boardwalk at 9 in the morning was populated with the specific population of a Southern California coastal path on a Saturday. Joggers, cyclists, the occasional family with a stroller moving at the speed of people who have decided that the day's primary obligation is the walk itself. The Hotel del Coronado rose to the west, its red roof vivid against the marine layer, and the Pacific was the color of hammered pewter and largely still. Victoria arrived at 8:55. She walked from the parking lot to the boardwalk and turned east and found a bench with sight lines in 3 directions and sat down. She was wearing jeans and the same dark blouse from the night before, which she'd washed out in the sink and dried with the hotel hairdryer, because she'd brought a single change of clothes, and the blouse was the one she'd arrived in and she was going to wear it until she had a reason to change. She watched the path. At 8:58, she spotted Garrett at the far end of the volleyball courts, 150 yards east, wearing a gray sweatshirt that still had the store tag on the collar. She could see it flapping, sitting on a bench with his phone out, performing the specific quality of relaxed attention that would pass at distance and wouldn't pass at close range. But close range wasn't the problem. She didn't look at him again. At 9:03, a man appeared from the parking lot access path. She'd estimated 30 to 32. She was close. He was 34, she would learn later, though he looked younger and older simultaneously in the way that people do when they've been through things that don't map onto normal aging. Medium height, military posture that he was working to relax without full success, dark haircut, recent and close. Civilian clothes, jeans, a plain long sleeve, no logo, no brand identifier. The shoes were wrong for casual walking, too specific, too designed for lateral movement, but most people wouldn't have noticed that. He spotted her immediately. She'd expected that. He walked over and sat down at the other end of the bench. They both looked at the water for a moment. "You brought someone," he said. "Volleyball courts," she said. "Gray sweatshirt." "Okay," he said, not offended, just acknowledging the geometry. "Who are you?" Victoria said. "My name is Trevor Haas." He said it without preamble, which she noted, using a real name was either honesty or a performance of honesty, and she'd find out which. "I served as a combat controller attached to your unit's successor cell from 2013 to 2016. Successor cell. After the program restructured. Same mission set, different designation. They brought in Air Force assets to supplement. That was my attachment." She looked at him. He had the hands and the posture and the particular quality of controlled stillness that couldn't be performed by someone who hadn't spent time in the specific kind of environment that made it. She wasn't certain, but she was not immediately skeptical. "You said Rourke wasn't an accident," she said. He looked at the water. "He called me," Haas said, 3 weeks before he went into the hospital. He'd been contacted by someone. He wouldn't give me a name, said he didn't want to pull me in until he knew what he had. But someone had sent him documentation, archive material, things from the operational window. "What kind of material?" "Mission logs. The kind that shouldn't exist in any accessible format." He paused. "And something else. A financial document. Transfer records." She looked at him. "Transfer records," she said. "From a discretionary fund connected to the program. Transfers made during the operational window that don't match any mission expenditure in the logs." He finally turned to look at her directly. "Significant amounts. Moving to accounts that don't have clean ownership." The marine layer was thinning slightly. She could see the sun trying to find its way through above the hotel roof, a lighter patch in the gray. "Someone was running money through the program," she said. "That's what the documentation suggests." And Rourke had the documentation. He told me he was going to verify it before he took it anywhere. He wanted to make sure it was real and not... He used the word planted. He was careful. Haas looked at his hands. "He went into the hospital 4 days after that call. Training accident. Land navigation course. Solo. No witnesses." "You went to someone with this?" Victoria said. "I tried." His jaw moved. "I went to my former chain, a colonel I trusted. He told me I was constructing a narrative around a coincidence, and if I took it further, it would be considered a credibility problem." "And then your file was pulled." Haas looked at her sharply. "You know about the archive pulls," he said. "Tell me who else you told." He blinked. The shift in direction caught him off guard, which was exactly why she'd shifted. "I told 2 people," he said.
My former chain, the colonel. And he stopped. And who else? He was quiet for 3 seconds. A woman I was seeing. She used to work analysis for a defense contractor. I told her what Rourke had said to me. I thought she'd know how to evaluate the document type. What's her name? Does that matter right now? Trevor. Victoria looked at him steadily. I need to know who else has this information, because someone photographed me at a memorial last night, and someone else spent 3 hours in 2009 to 2016 archive files, and Danny Rourke is dead. So yes, it matters. He looked at her. Lydia Marsh, he said. She kept her expression from moving. Marsh. Gillian Marsh's daughter, he said. I know who Gillian Marsh is, Victoria said carefully. She had sat across from Gillian Marsh in a conference room 12 hours ago, drinking the coffee Marsh had brought her, answering questions, being read. She had told Marsh, I came here to say goodbye to someone. She had not told Marsh anything about the message, had not shown her the phone, had specifically and deliberately not shared anything of operational substance. But Marsh had been there, in the building, with access. For a separate matter, Weston had said. She thought about that. The marine layer shifted. A seam of actual blue appeared above the hotel roof, pale and distant, the sky behind the weather. Tell me about the documentation, Victoria said. The financial records. Where are they now? Rourke had them. Haas looked at the water. I don't know what he did with them. He said he was going to secure them somewhere before he moved on the verification. He paused. If he knew someone was onto him, he'd have put them somewhere that couldn't be accessed without a specific step, some kind of trigger, a dead man's switch, or something like it. He turned to look at her. He trusted you, specifically. He told me that on the call. He said if it went sideways, you were the one he'd want holding the material. Victoria was very still. He didn't contact me, she said. I know. Haas's voice was careful. I think he was trying to protect you. He knew your separation status, that you were out, that you had distance from it. He didn't want to pull you in until he was sure. He didn't get sure in time. No, Haas said. He didn't. The boardwalk continued its Saturday morning life around them. A pair of joggers passed. A cyclist swerved to avoid a child on a low bike. The ordinary metabolism of a morning at the beach, indifferent to what was being said on the bench. If he set a trigger, Victoria said, how would it reach me? That's why I needed to find you, Haas said. I don't know the mechanism, but whatever he set up, I think it's already in motion. He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, sealed, her name written on the front in handwriting she recognized from a decade ago, from a log in Djibouti, from a card she'd received when she separated. She looked at the envelope. She looked at Haas. Where did you get this? She said. Rourke mailed it, to an address I didn't know he had for me. Haas held it out. It arrived yesterday. She took it. She turned it over. Unopened. Intact. The seal unbroken. She looked at her name on the front. Danny's handwriting, hurried, slightly tilted, the capital V of Victoria made with a single stroke the way he always did it, which she hadn't known she remembered until she was looking at it. She put the envelope in her pocket. Thank you, she said. What are you going to do? Read it first, she said. Then decide. The people pulling the archive, he started. I know, she said. If they find out you have... I know, she said, again. He stopped, looked at her. The boardwalk, the water, the thinning marine layer. He had the look of a man who has handed off something heavy and feels both relieved and newly afraid because the handing off doesn't actually remove the weight from the situation, only from his hands. Are you going to be okay? He said. Victoria stood. She looked at the Pacific, the hammered pewter water, the seam of blue that had widened slightly above the hotel roof while they'd been sitting. Danny Rourke held his hand on a wound in my arm for 4 minutes in the dark, she said. I'm going to read his letter. She left Haas on the bench and walked east. Garrett fell into step beside her at the volleyball courts without a word, the sweatshirt tag still flapping at his collar. He looked at her face and read whatever was on it and didn't ask questions, which was the right call. They walked to the parking lot. She got into the passenger side of his car. He'd moved it down from the hotel.
and he got behind the wheel and started the engine and turned the heater on because the marine layer made the morning cold, and then he waited. She took the envelope from her pocket. She opened it carefully, along the seal, the way you open something you want to be intact after. Inside was a single folded page. She opened it. Garrett, in the driver's seat, looked forward at the parking lot, giving her the architecture of privacy while being present. She read. The letter was 3 paragraphs. The handwriting was Danny's, saying that same tilted, hurried quality, a man who always had more thoughts than patience for the physical act of writing them down. The first paragraph said he was sorry for the indirect contact, that he'd been careful for weeks and was running out of time to be careful. The second paragraph described a location, a storage facility in El Cajon, 23 miles northeast, a unit number, a combination. Inside, a waterproof box. Inside the box, a copied drive and a set of printed records. The third paragraph said, if you're reading this, I didn't get to finish what I started. I need you to finish it. Not because it was mine, Victoria, because it was ours. We were all there. We all deserve the truth of what was done with what we built. Don't let them erase us. And then, at the bottom, below his name, the joke's punchline is, because at least the Navy doctor knows which end is the patient. You can stop trying to remember it now. Victoria folded the page. She put it in her pocket, next to where the envelope had been. The parking lot was quiet. The marine layer above the windshield was moving, thinning, breaking, the blue sky arriving behind it in sections. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth for a moment. One moment. The specific duration of a thing that needs to be felt and also needs to be done with. Then she took her hand down. El Cajon, she said. I need to get to a storage facility. Garrett looked at her. He didn't ask about the letter, didn't ask what she was feeling or what the letter said, or what Danny Rourke had written in the last weeks of his life to a woman he'd trusted enough to make the end of a chain. He put the car in reverse. Tell me the address, he said. She told him. He pulled out of the parking lot and onto Orange Avenue and drove northeast, and the marine layer continued to break apart overhead, and by the time they reached the highway, the sky behind it was entirely blue, and the morning was doing what San Diego mornings do, eventually, despite their own resistance. The sun came out. It was not a comfort exactly, but it was there. The storage facility in El Cajon was the kind of place that exists in every mid-sized American city without anyone particularly noticing it. A long, low building behind a chain-link fence, orange roll-up doors in 2 rows, a keypad entry at the gate that took 3 tries before Garrett's car cleared through because someone had spilled something on the number pad, and the 6 was sticky. Unit 47 was in the 2nd row, 3rd from the end. Victoria had the combination from the letter. 4 digits, then a directional sequence on the lock that she executed on the first try. The way you execute things when you have read the instructions carefully and are not rushing, even when every part of your body wants to rush. The door went up. Inside, a metal shelf unit, a folded tarp, 2 empty plastic bins, and on the shelf, in the back left corner, a waterproof Pelican case about the size of a shoebox. Gray, latched, a strip of black electrical tape along the seam that Danny had added himself. She could tell by the angle of it, the way he always ran tape, slightly diagonal without realizing it, a habit she'd noticed in the field when he was securing anything. She pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves from her jacket pocket. She carried them the same way she carried a folding knife and a small flashlight, without drama, because the habit was old enough that doing otherwise would have felt incomplete. She unlatched the case. Inside, packed in foam, a portable hard drive, black, standard external format, and underneath it, a manila envelope containing printed documents. She could tell by the weight and the slight rigidity when she lifted the envelope that it was substantial, 40 or 50 pages at least. She didn't open either of them here. She latched the case, took it, pulled the storage unit door down behind her. Garrett was standing by the car watching the facility entrance, not pretending to do something else. Just watching, which was more honest and more useful. She held up the case. He opened the car doors. They drove. Garrett had a contact in San Diego, a woman named Petra, who had at various points in the last decade worked private intelligence, federal contracting, and a period of deliberately uncategorized work that neither of them discussed specifically.
She had a house in Mission Hills with a secure workroom in the basement, and more relevantly, the kind of equipment that could image a drive, verify document authenticity, and run a financial trace without the process appearing in any network log that a government database would pick up. Garrett called her from the car. She picked up on the second ring, said something short, hung up. 20 minutes, he said. Does she know what this is? She knows it's mine and it's time sensitive. He glanced at her. That's enough for Petra. The drive to Mission Hills took 24 minutes because of a light rail crossing on Washington that held them for 3 cycles. Victoria sat with the Pelican case on her lap and watched the city doing its Saturday morning things. A farmer's market on one street, a repair shop with its roll-up doors open, and 2 mechanics under a lifted truck. A restaurant putting chairs out on its sidewalk tables in the optimistic way restaurants do before the lunch crowd confirms or denies the optimism. She thought about Danny's third paragraph. We were all there. We all deserve the truth of what was done with what we built. She thought about what that meant. Specifically, what was done with what they built. The unit had built something over 31 months in an operational theater that nobody acknowledged. They had built a record of specific capacities, specific results, specific sacrifices that had been sufficient to justify continued program funding and the creation of a successor cell that ran until at least 2016. What had been done with that? With the funding? With the discretionary accounts? She thought about the financial transfers Haas had described. Significant amounts. Accounts without clean ownership. Moving through a program that nobody outside the program could audit because the program officially didn't exist. She pressed her hand flat against the top of the Pelican case. Don't let them erase us. Petra's house had a front garden that was doing better than the surrounding houses' front gardens, which Victoria filed under the category of people who control what they can control because the other category is too large to manage. She was maybe 55, compact, with the kind of gray-streaked hair that suggested a decision to stop intervening in the process rather than an inability to. She opened the door before they knocked, because she'd been watching the camera, and she looked at Victoria with the neutral professional assessment of someone meeting a stranger who has arrived with a classified problem and a Pelican case. Garrett said time sensitive, she said. Yesterday would have been better, Victoria said. Come in. The basement workroom was smaller than Victoria had expected, and better equipped than she had any right to expect given that it was in a residential house in Mission Hills. 2 monitors, a rack of drives, a printer that looked capable and well-maintained, an air-gapped laptop, and on the wall a whiteboard with the remnants of something she'd been working on that Petra erased in 3 strokes before they could look at it, which was appropriate and expected. Victoria set the case on the work table. She opened the envelope first, the printed documents, and spread them across the surface. Petra looked at them without touching, reading quickly, the way people read when they're cataloging rather than absorbing. Financial records. Transfer logs, Victoria said, from a discretionary fund attached to a classified program. I need origin accounts, destination accounts, and any ownership trace you can run on the destinations. Petra picked up the first page with 2 fingers, holding it by the edge. These are originals or copies? Copies. Printed from a digital source. The drive will have the source. Who made the copies? A colleague. Victoria paused. He's dead. Petra set the page down. Looked at Garrett. Back at Victoria. The professional neutral expression held, but something behind it recalibrated. What's the timeline? Petra said. Someone else is looking for this material, Victoria said. I don't know how far behind they are. Best guess. Victoria thought about the archive pulls. 6 weeks to her file, Haas's contact with his colonel, the message last night, the photograph at the memorial. Hours, she said. Maybe less. Petra looked at the documents. Okay, she said. She went to the rack and pulled a drive imager. Give me the external, Hut. While Petra worked, methodically, without commentary, with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this under worse conditions than a Saturday morning in her own basement, Victoria stood at the whiteboard with a marker and began laying out what she knew. She wrote names. Not full names. Abbreviated identifiers. The Colonel Haas had gone to. Jillian Marsh and the question mark next to her name. The unknown account owners. The operational window dates. Garrett sat in the corner chair and drank coffee that Petra had provided without asking, and watched Victoria work with the expression of a man
who has seen this before and knows that the best contribution he can make right now is to stay out of the way. 20 minutes in, Petra said, "The drive is clean. No wipe attempts. No partition corruption. Whatever your colleague did, he preserved this carefully." "What's on it?" "Transaction logs. Same material as the printed copies, but more complete. The prints are a subset." She paused. "There are also communication records, encrypted, but the encryption is a commercial package, not military, which means—" "You can open it," Victoria said. "I already did." Petra turned from the screen. "It's correspondence between two parties. The correspondence spans 14 months and references specific transfer amounts that match the transaction logs." She looked at Victoria. "There's a name in it." The room held that for a moment. "Whose name?" Victoria said. Petra said, "A Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense named Warren Caulfield. He was attached to the Oversight Committee for the program during your operational window." Victoria wrote the name on the whiteboard. She stared at it. Warren Caulfield. She ran the name against her operational memory, not against a clear image of a person, because the people on the Oversight Committee had not been presences in the field. They had been names on authorization headers and signatures on allocation documents. But the name had a frequency to it, a particular cadence of repetition across the paperwork landscape of 3 years. "What does the correspondence say?" she said. "It takes me a while to read it fully," Petra said, "but the first 12 messages are a negotiation about access and about what specific operational results would justify what specific transfer amounts." She stopped. Victoria turned. "Someone was paying Caulfield," Petra said carefully, "for intelligence outputs from the program. Outputs that were derived from your unit's mission results, passed laterally, not through the chain, not through proper intelligence sharing protocols, to a private recipient." "Which recipient?" "The second party in the correspondence uses a handle, no name, but there's a company reference in 2 of the messages." Petra turned back to the screen and read, "Viridian Strategic Solutions." Victoria looked at Garrett. Garrett said, "I know that name." "So do I," Victoria said. Viridian Strategic Solutions was a defense contractor with contracts across multiple federal agencies, publicly traded, headquartered in Northern Virginia, specializing in what their website described as actionable intelligence integration. She had encountered the name in a peripheral way 3 years ago in a debrief context, attached to a contracting dispute that had seemed administrative at the time, and apparently was not. "They bought mission intelligence," Victoria said. It wasn't a question. She was stating it to hear it said, to confirm it against the shape of everything else. "That's what this reads like," Petra said. "Your unit went into the field. Results were generated. Someone in program oversight sold those results laterally to a private firm that then packaged and resold them, presumably to clients that the U.S. government didn't authorize to receive them, while the operators who generated the intelligence had no idea it was being monetized," Victoria said. "Based on this material, no." Victoria put the marker down on the whiteboard tray. She stood with her back to the room for a moment, not dramatically, just the particular stillness of a person absorbing something that is as bad as they thought it would be, and also worse. Danny had known this, had found this, had spent the last weeks of his life verifying it carefully, alone, trying to protect people he cared about from the process, and had died on a land navigation course with no witnesses. "Can you authenticate the documents?" she said. "I can verify the metadata on the digital files, creation dates, modification history, source formatting. I can't subpoena bank records or officially verify the transfer amounts against Treasury data, but I can establish that these files are what they present themselves as and weren't recently fabricated." Petra paused. "For official authentication, you'd need a federal forensic examiner or a federal investigator," Victoria said. "Yes." She thought about Jillian Marsh. She thought about Marsh sitting across from her in a conference room at 11:43, bringing her coffee, asking careful questions. The professional neutral face, the particular quality of attention that Victoria had read as investigative but hadn't specifically traced to a motive. She thought about Trevor Haas saying, "Lydia Marsh, Jillian Marsh's daughter." She thought about Haas telling his story to Lydia, a woman who worked defense analysis, whose mother was an NCIS agent who had been on Naval Station Coronado last night for a separate matter, at a time that happened to coincide exactly with an incident involving a classified operator, and a set of events that somebody in the program oversight chain would very much have wanted to monitor. She thought about it. She turned. "Garrett," she said. "Yeah,
Marsh, last night.
what do you know about NCIS's current contracting fraud caseload?" He looked at her. "Not much."
Why?
"Viridian Strategic Solutions," she said. "How long have they been a public company?" He pulled out his phone, typed, read. "Went public in 2018. Prior to that, private entity established 2011. During the operational window." "Yes. If someone were building a case against a company like Viridian," she said slowly, "and the evidentiary material was locked in a classified program archive that required specific access to pull, what federal body would have both the clearance and the mandate to access it?" Garrett looked at the ceiling. "NCIS has jurisdiction over fraud related to naval programs," he said. "Yes. If someone in the chain tipped them, or if they'd been building from the outside in," Victoria said, "and needed to get close to someone who had access to the unit's network." She looked at Garrett. Haas told Lydia Marsh the story. Lydia Marsh is NCIS Agent Marsh's daughter, and NCIS Agent Marsh was in the building last night when a woman connected to the classified program was detained. The room was quiet. Petra had stopped typing. "That's either a coincidence," Garrett said. "I know. Or someone's been running a parallel track on this for a while, and last night handed them a reason to make direct contact." "Which is what Marsh was doing," Victoria said, "in the conference room. She wasn't babysitting me. She was making an assessment." "Of whether you were a resource or a problem," Petra said. They both looked at her. "Sorry," Petra said, without sounding particularly sorry. "Just completing the thought." Victoria looked at the whiteboard. The names, the dates, the arrows she'd drawn between them. "I need to call Marsh," she said. "Victoria," Garrett started. "If she's building a case, she needs this material," Victoria said. "And if she's not, if I'm wrong about what she is, then I need to know that before I do anything else with it, because the alternative is walking this into a federal building myself, and I have no standing to do that. You could take it to Cross. Cross would route it through the chain. The chain is part of the problem." She looked at him. If Caulfield had an oversight role, he had relationships up and down the command structure. "I don't know how far it goes. I don't want to hand this to someone who hands it to someone who makes it disappear." Garrett put his phone on the table. He sat back. "Make the call," he said. Ian. Marsh picked up on the first ring, which meant she'd been waiting for it. "Miss Kane," she said. "We need to meet," Victoria said. "In person. Today." A pause. 2 seconds. "Where are you?" "I'll come to you. Are you still on the base?" "No, I'm at my office in the federal building downtown." Another pause, shorter. "How did you get this number?" "You gave it to me last night," Victoria said, "when you sat down with the coffee." A beat. "I didn't give you my number," Marsh said. "You set your phone on the table when you were taking notes, and the screen was face up." Victoria waited. "I notice things. It's a habit." Silence. Then Marsh said, "Be here at 2. "I'll be there at 1:30, Victoria said. "We don't have time to negotiate." She hung up. Petra was looking at her. "You read her phone number upside down off a screen in the middle of a conversation at midnight." "I was a combat medic and a breacher," Victoria said. "I had a lot of time in holding positions to get good at things that weren't strictly in my job description." Petra looked at Garrett. Garrett said, "She's not exaggerating, Mub. The federal building in downtown San Diego was everything federal buildings are. The specific institutional weight of architecture designed to communicate permanence and process, and the particular seriousness of what happens inside. Victoria went through security with Garrett. She'd decided he was coming this time, visibly, because this meeting required the implicit message of 2 people rather than 1, and they took the elevator to the 4th floor. Marsh was waiting in a conference room that was different from the institutional space on the base. Smaller, more personalized, with a credenza along one wall that held actual books and 2 framed photographs and a coffee maker that looked like it had been brought from home. She was not alone. Beside her, standing at the window, was a man Victoria didn't recognize. Tall, mid-50s, dark suit, the posture of someone who had spent significant time in formal settings,
and carried the formality in his spine even when not required to. Victoria stopped inside the doorway. "I said meet," Victoria said, "not convene." "This is Deputy Director Hollis," Marsh said. "He's been on this case for 7 months." "What case?" Victoria said. "Please sit down," Hollis said. "What case?" she said again. Marsh and Hollis looked at each other with the specific brief eye contact of two people confirming a decision that has already been made. "Viridian Strategic Solutions," Marsh said. "We've been building a federal fraud case centered on their acquisition of classified intelligence outputs through improper lateral channels." The room was very still. Victoria sat down. Garrett sat beside her. "Tell me what you have," Hollis said. "Tell me what you have first," Victoria said, "because I'm not walking material into this room without knowing whether you're going to be able to use it or whether you're going to classify it back into the same hole it came from." Hollis studied her. "You're not our subject," he said. "I know I'm not your subject. That's not what I asked." He looked at Marsh. Marsh said, "We have bank records. Domestic accounts connected to Caulfield. Warren Caulfield, former deputy." "I know who he is," Victoria said. "We have correspondence fragments. Enough to establish the relationship, but not enough to prove the specific intelligence outputs that were transferred." She paused. "We've been trying for 4 months to get to the source documents, the ones that would prove what specific material was sold and when." "Because those documents are in a classified archive," Victoria said. "Yes, and pulling them officially would alert whoever in the oversight chain is still protecting Caulfield." Marsh looked at her carefully. "You understand the problem." "I understand the problem," Victoria said, "because a colleague of mine understood it first and spent the last weeks of his life trying to solve it and died on a training course with no witnesses." She looked at Hollis. "His name was Daniel Rourke. He was a chief petty officer attached to the classified program, and he was good at his job, and he found the documentation you needed, and something happened to him before he could get it to you." Hollis's expression didn't change, which meant he already knew. "You knew about Rourke," Victoria said. "We were aware he'd been making inquiries," Hollis said carefully. "He contacted you?" A pause that lasted 1 beat too long. "He made contact with a field office approximately 5 weeks ago, indirectly. He indicated he had material but needed time to verify. And then he went into the hospital." "Yes." "And you didn't—" She stopped, started differently. "After he died, you didn't escalate." "We had no confirmed material," Hollis said. "Without the source documents, he was a person," she said. "Flat. Not angry, exactly. The flatness was doing more work than anger could have. He came to you with information about a federal crime, and 5 weeks later he was dead, and you had no confirmed material, so what? You filed it?" Hollis said nothing. Marsh said, "It's more complicated than—" "I know it's more complicated," Victoria said. "That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the complication cost a man his life, and I want to know that you understand that before I put anything on this table." The room held it. Hollis looked at the table. "We understand," he said, and his voice, for the first time, had something in it that wasn't official. Victoria put the Pelican case on the table. She unlatched it. She set the drive and the printed documents and her phone with the photograph on it, and Danny's letter in its envelope side by side on the surface. "My colleague preserved this carefully," she said. "It contains the source documents, transaction logs, correspondence between Caulfield and Viridian, and enough metadata to establish authenticity under forensic review." She looked at Marsh. "I had a preliminary analysis done this morning by a private forensic specialist. I can provide her verification." Marsh was already reaching for the printed documents. "The correspondence names Caulfield directly," Victoria said. "It spans 14 months during the program's operational window. The transfers referenced in the logs match the amounts in the correspondence to within 3%, which is consistent with the kind of variance you get when someone is skimming handling fees." Hollis sat down. He sat down the way people sit down when a case that has been an 8-month slog suddenly becomes something else. "There's a name in the correspondence," Victoria said. "A handle on the Viridian side. We couldn't trace it forensically in the time we had this morning." "We may be able to," Marsh said. She was reading the first page. Her eyes moved fast. "There's one more thing," Victoria said. Marsh looked up. "The archive pulls," Victoria said.
Someone has been accessing the classified archive systematically for 6 weeks, pulling files connected to the program, including mine and Rourke's. She looked at Hollis. That pull pattern is either Viridian trying to determine who knew what and who Rourke might have talked to, or it's someone inside your investigation covering tracks. Hollis went very still. What do you mean? He said. I mean that 6 weeks ago, before Rourke was dead, before any of this was visible from the outside, someone with authorized access to the classified archive was already pulling files connected to the program. That person knew enough about the unit's structure to know which file designations to target. She looked at him steadily. Rourke called Haas 3 weeks before he died. Haas told 2 people. One was a colonel who dismissed it, and then Haas's file was pulled. One was a woman named Lydia Marsh. Kamendimasa. Marsh set the document down. Her face did something. Lydia is my daughter, she said. I know. She works defense analysis. I know. She would never. I'm not saying she did anything deliberate, Victoria said carefully. I'm saying that the information went from Haas to Lydia, and Lydia may have discussed it with someone she trusted at her firm, and her firm may have connections to the contracting world that made that information travel further than she intended. She paused. I'm not accusing your daughter of anything, Agent Marsh. I'm telling you where I think the leak is. Marsh was very still. Her firm, Marsh said. Not a question. The beginning of a thought that was becoming visible as it was thought. What firm does she work for? Garrett said. Marsh looked at the table. She looked at it for 3 seconds. She's been at Meridian Analytics for 18 months, she said. They're a defense subcontractor. Silence. Who are Meridian's primary clients? Victoria said. Another 3 seconds. I don't know specifically, Marsh said. Her voice had changed. The professional neutral was still there, but it was doing harder work now, maintaining itself against something that was pulling very hard in another direction. I'd have to look. Hollis already had his phone out. He was typing. He looked up. Meridian Analytics is a subsidiary, he said. Formed 2019. Parent company. He stopped. Say it, Victoria said. Parent company is Viridian Strategic Solutions, he said. The room did what rooms do when something that has been complicated becomes simple in the worst possible way. Marsh put both hands flat on the table. She sat with that for a moment. Her daughter, 18 months, a job that had come through what network, through what recommendation, with what visibility into what the girl had heard from the man she was seeing. She didn't know, Marsh said. Almost certainly not, Victoria said. And she meant it. She didn't think Lydia Marsh had understood what she was part of. You didn't have to understand what you were part of to be useful to it. But she talked about what Haas told her, Marsh said. At work, probably. To someone she trusted. Someone who then passed it up a chain she couldn't see. Marsh closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them. She looked at Hollis. We need to pull Meridian's internal communications. I'll need a warrant. Write it, she said. Today. Hollis stood. He picked up the Pelican case carefully with both hands. We'll need you both available, he said to Victoria, for depositions, authentication of how this material was recovered. I know, Victoria said. You may be called as a witness in a federal fraud proceeding. I know that too. Given your service records classification status, that's going to require a specific accommodation process. Hollis, Marsh said, not unkindly. She knows. He stopped, looked at Victoria. For a moment, he was just a man in his mid-50s who had been working an 8-month case and was standing in a conference room holding a small waterproof box that contained the piece he'd been looking for, brought in by a woman he'd learned about 11 hours ago from a security incident report. Thank you, he said. Victoria looked at the box in his hands. Don't thank me, she said. Get it done. He left. Marsh didn't leave immediately. She stayed at the table after Hollis was gone, and the conference room held the particular quiet of a space that has recently contained something significant and is settling back into itself. Victoria didn't push her. Garrett got up and went to the credenza and poured 3 cups of coffee without asking and came back and set them down. She'll be okay, Victoria said. About Lydia. If she genuinely didn't know, and she didn't,
The legal exposure is minimal. I know, Marsh said. The firm exploited her. That's on them. I know. Marsh wrapped her hands around the cup. I recruited her into defense work in a general way. 10 years ago, she was considering law school, and I told her intelligence analysis was more interesting. She paused. I don't know what I'm doing with that right now. You're not doing anything with it right now, Victoria said. Right now you're drinking the coffee. Marsh looked at her. You're an unusual person, she said. So I've been told. Last night, in that room, you had more leverage than you used. You knew things you didn't share. You sat in there for 3 hours in handcuffs when you could have pushed harder. I told you last night, Victoria said. I came to say goodbye to someone. Yes. Marsh turned the cup in her hands. Did you get 2? Victoria thought about Danny's letter in her pocket. The 3 paragraphs. The punchline. Not yet, she said, but I will. Marsh nodded. Outside the conference room window, San Diego was doing its afternoon things. The skyline, the bay visible from this angle as a strip of blue-gray between buildings. A container ship moving slowly on the water. The whole working, indifferent, living machinery of a city that didn't know and would never know what had been set in motion in this room. What happens now, Garrett said. Now we wait for Hollis to move on the warrant, Marsh said. When Meridian's communications come up, she stopped, looked at Victoria. Caulfield has been out of the government for 3 years. He's been consulting. Do you know for whom? Victoria looked at her. Let me guess, she said. Marsh almost smiled. Viridian's board, she said, joined their advisory council in 2022, 9 months after he left the government. That's not legal, Garrett said. It depends on how the arrangement was structured and what information he was leveraging, Marsh said. The revolving door has a lot of room in it if you know how to use it. Her expression had come back to its professional level, the earlier crack sutured over, not gone, but managed. With what's in that case, the arrangement becomes considerably less legal. Timeline? Victoria said. Weeks, Marsh said. These things don't move quickly. I know. Victoria stood. I need to go back to the base. Marsh looked up. The memorial? Cross told me to finish it properly, she said. He was right. She picked up her jacket from the chair back. Agent Marsh, she said. Marsh looked at her. When the case moves, when it becomes public, there will be people from the unit whose records will surface as part of the evidence. They'll have questions and no context for the answers. She paused. I'd like to be the one who tells them what happened, before it's in the news. Marsh looked at her for a moment. I'll make sure you get that call, she said. Victoria nodded. She and Garrett left the conference room and walked down the federal building corridor toward the elevator, and the fluorescent lights above them were the neutral, institutional kind that tell you nothing about the time of day, and the building around them had the specific sound of a Saturday afternoon, reduced and quiet. At the elevator, Garrett pressed the button. You okay? He said. She thought about Danny's letter in her pocket. The storage unit in El Cajon. The morning on the boardwalk. The drive from the Marriott. All of it laid end to end, the whole shape of the last 20 hours. Ask me later, she said. Later when? After I go back to the memorial table and finish looking at that photograph. The elevator came. They got in. The doors closed and the floor dropped away beneath them, and for a moment they were between levels, suspended in the metal cable and the machinery that moved them. And then the lobby opened in front of them and they walked out into the afternoon, which was clear now. The marine layer gone, the sun over the bay genuine and direct, and making no particular statement about anything. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. A message from a number she didn't recognize, different from last night's number, different format, area code she placed as Northern Virginia. The message said, I know what you've given them. This isn't finished. She read it once, put her phone in her pocket. Garrett, she said. I saw it, he said. He'd been looking at his own phone, Petra probably, running a trace she'd started this morning. The case isn't sealed yet. No, Victoria said. It isn't. Whoever that is, Caulfield, someone on his team, they know you went to NCIS. They were watching the building, she said, or they're monitoring Marsh's communications. Which means the window Hollis has to move on the warrant is smaller than he thinks, she said.
She stopped walking. She pulled out her phone, found Marsh's number, called it. Marsh picked up before the second ring. "I saw it," Marsh said. She'd gotten the same message, or a version of it. Her voice was different now, tighter, the professional speed of someone shifting modes. "I'm calling Hollis now." "Tell him the window is closing," Victoria said. "He knows." "Make sure he acts like he knows." A beat. "Victoria," Marsh said. "Yes." "The person who sent that message to you?" She paused. "They have your personal number, the same number you used to call me." Victoria had already thought of that. "I know," she said. "That number came through the contact chain last night, through the base security office, through Weston's paperwork." "I know." "Which means someone in the building last night was working for them," Victoria said, "or someone who had access to the evening's incident documentation." Marsh was quiet for 2 seconds. "I'll pull the access logs," she said, "for who touched that paperwork after midnight." "Good. Stay somewhere I can reach you." "I will," Victoria said. She paused. "Marsh, go talk to your daughter today before the warrants move and it becomes official. She deserves to hear it from you." A longer pause. "Yes," Marsh said. "You're right." Victoria hung up. She and Garrett stood on the sidewalk outside the federal building in the direct afternoon sun, and the city moved around them, and the bay was blue in the distance. And someone's Northern Virginia number was in her recent calls, and the case was in motion, and the window was narrowing, and Danny Rourke had died on a land navigation course with no witnesses. "We need a secure place to be for the next few hours," Garrett said. "Petra's," she said. "She won't mind?" "She'll mind," Victoria said. "She'll let us anyway." They walked to the car. Petra did mind. She said so at the door, directly and without softening it, and then stepped back and let them in, which was the most honest version of hospitality Victoria had encountered in a long time. The basement workroom was still set up from the morning, the monitors running background processes, the image drives, duplicate files organized in a folder structure on the air-gapped machine. Petra made them sandwiches and charged them for the use of her equipment. Not a lot, and not metaphorically. And then went upstairs to do whatever she did on Saturday afternoons and left them to it. Victoria sat at the work table. Garrett sat in the corner chair. They waited. The first call came at 4:17. It was Marsh, and her voice had the taut, compressed quality of someone managing several things simultaneously and reporting on one of them. "Hollis moved on the warrant," she said. "Federal judge signed it at 3:52. Meridian's servers are being imaged now." "And Caulfield?" Victoria said. "He's been notified not to travel. Passport flagged." A pause. "His attorney called the U.S. Attorney's Office at 4:06. That's 11 minutes after the warrant was signed, which tells you something about his monitoring capacity. He has someone watching the court system. Or watching Hollis's office. We're running that down." Another pause, shorter. "The Northern Virginia number you received. We traced it. It's a burner, purchased in Tyson's Corner 3 weeks ago. But the cell towers it pinged put it within 2 miles of Viridian's corporate campus on 4 separate occasions." "So, Viridian. Almost certainly, we're building the connection now." Marsh's voice shifted slightly. "Victoria?" "Yes." "I talked to Lydia." The line held silence for a moment. "How is she?" Victoria said. "Devastated." Marsh's voice was carefully level. She had no idea. She thought her team was doing standard defense analysis work, summarizing threat reports, building briefing documents. She didn't know what the underlying material was or where it came from. "She wouldn't have," Victoria said. "That's how these things work. The people at the bottom do legitimate work. The contamination is in the sourcing, not the output. She's cooperating, voluntarily. Her supervisor at Meridian, a man named David Kwan, has already lawyered up, which tells you where the actual knowledge was sitting." "Kwan is connected to Viridian's intelligence intake?" "We think he was the interface," Marsh said. "The person Haas's information reached when Lydia discussed it at work. Kwan would have passed it upward, and upward would have initiated the archive monitoring to identify the threat, which meant Haas told Lydia, Lydia trusted Kwan alerted Viridian, Viridian started pulling files. Rourke's file was pulled 5 days before his death." Victoria said, "Has anyone talked to the Colonel Haas reported to, his former chain?" "We're scheduling that conversation," Marsh said. "He's retained counsel as well." He dismissed Haas's report. Yes. That's going to be a question of whether he dismissed it because he believed it was unfounded or because he was protecting something. A pause. We don't know yet. When will you know? Days? Maybe a week? Victoria looked at the whiteboard, the names, the arrows, the word Viridian in the center of it, written in her handwriting, the marker lines slightly uneven because she'd been standing at an angle when she wrote it. I need to ask you something, Victoria said. Ask. Rourke's death. Is it being looked at as a criminal matter now? The pause was 3 seconds long, and those 3 seconds contained a great deal. There's been a request opened with NCIS, Marsh said carefully, for a formal review of the circumstances of the training accident, given the timeline and the relationship to the material we now have. She stopped. I can't tell you more than that right now. I'm not asking for more, Victoria said. I'm asking whether someone is looking. Someone is looking, Marsh said. Thank you. She hung up. Garrett from the corner. Timeline? Days to a week on the full picture. The warrant is moving. Caulfield is flagged. She looked at the whiteboard. Rourke's death is being reviewed. Garrett was quiet. It's not enough, he said. I know. Reviews take years. Caulfield has lawyers. Viridian has an entire legal department. I know that too. She turned. It's what we have. It's what Danny preserved for us to have. I'm not going to spend the next 6 hours being angry that it isn't everything when 3 days ago it was nothing. He looked at her. Fair, he said. Go home, Garrett. I'm not. Go home, she said. Not harshly. You drove from Phoenix at midnight for me. You've been here all day. Your daughter's birthday is, she thought back, Tuesday, and you haven't mentioned it once, which means you're pretending it isn't coming up because you think that's what the situation requires. He stared at her. How do you know about my daughter's birthday? You told me. Frankfurt, 2022. You were late to her party because of the debrief and you talked about it for 40 minutes on the drive to the airport. She looked at him steadily. Go home. Be there on Tuesday. That's an order and I outranked you, so… He sat with that for a moment. You were a petty officer, he said. I was GS 13. Pay grades don't transfer. I think you'll find… Garrett. He stopped. She crossed the room and stood in front of him, and she put one hand briefly on his shoulder. Not a hug, not a dramatic gesture, just the specific weight of a hand saying something that didn't have a clean verbal form. Thank you, she said, for driving, for the gray sweatshirt, for all of it. He looked up at her. The tag's still on it, he said. I know. I kept forgetting to take it off. I know. She took her hand back. Drive safe. Call me when you're home. He stood, picked up his jacket from the chair arm, held it for a moment. Victoria, he said. Yeah. What Danny wrote. In the letter. The thing about finishing it. He paused. You finished it. She looked at the whiteboard. Not yet, she said, but soon. She stayed at Petra's until 6. Then she drove. She'd rented a car while Garrett was buying the sweatshirt, a practical gray sedan that she'd been operating on muscle memory all day. Back to Coronado, not to the base, to the Hotel Del. The Rourke family had reserved a suite for the extended memorial. The family had come from Ohio, his mother and 2 sisters, and several of his teammates who'd taken leave to be there. The formal part of the previous night had fallen apart in the way it had fallen apart, but the family had stayed, and this afternoon they'd gathered again, informally, in the suite's main room, the way people do when grief has nowhere specific to be, and being together is better than the alternative. She had texted his sister, a woman named Caroline whom she'd met twice, briefly, in the years when Danny was still alive and still sometimes surfaced in the civilian world long enough to connect people who cared about him, at 5:45. Caroline had texted back in 2 minutes. Please come. The suite was full, but not overwhelming. Maybe 20 people, a mix of family and former teammates, and a few partners who sat in corners and understood that the room's primary language was one they'd never been taught and were there out of love rather than comprehension. Someone had ordered a spread from a restaurant nearby. Real food, the kind that requires plates, which was better than the reception catering from last night that Victoria had never touched. She came in quietly, Caroline found her within 30 seconds. She was Danny's older sister by 3 years and had his eyes. The same quality in them, the sense of being ahead of something, though in Caroline it expressed as warmth rather than humor, and the combination was striking in a way that required a moment. She hugged Victoria without preamble. Not a polite hug, the kind that is about the person being held. "I heard what happened last night," Caroline said, against her shoulder. "I'm so sorry." "It's not," Victoria started. "Don't." Caroline stepped back and looked at her. "It happened at his memorial. I'm allowed to be sorry." "Okay," Victoria said. "You're right. He talked about you," Caroline said. "More than he talked about most people from work." Which is saying something because he basically never talked about work. He was careful. "He was private," Caroline said. "There's a difference. With work, he was careful. With the people he cared about, he was just," she looked for the word, "private." Like he kept a small box for the things that mattered, and he didn't open it for just anyone. Victoria thought about the Pelican case in El Cajon. "He kept a box for a lot of things," she said. Caroline looked at her. Something in the way Victoria said it made her look, not searching for a specific meaning, just recognizing that there was one. "Come eat something," she said. "You look like you haven't stopped all day." "I haven't." "Then come eat." She stayed 2 hours. She ate. She talked to 2 of Danny's teammates, men she knew peripherally from overlapping operational periods, neither of whom she'd served with directly. Both of whom had the particular quality of people who had cared about the same person and were now in the strange shared grief of that. One of them, a man named Osei, who had Danny's phone contact from their time attached to the successor cell, pulled her aside near the window at one point. "He called me," Osei said. Low voice. The window overlooked the beach, and the sun was doing its California thing with the water, making it copper and gold in a way that was almost too much if you let yourself look at it directly. "About 3 weeks before. Said he was working on something and he might need help documenting it." "I know," Victoria said. "I found what he was working on." Osei looked at her carefully. "Is it handled?" he said. "It's in motion," she said. "It's going to take time, but it's in the right hands." He nodded once. The nod of a man who has decided to believe what he's been told because the person telling him has earned the benefit of that belief. "He was good," Osei said. "About Danny." "The best I served with," Victoria said. And she meant it without qualification, which was not something she said about many people. They stood at the window for a moment, the copper light on the water, the beach below, with its small evening population of people walking dogs and watching the sun. "He cheated at cards," Osei said. "Badly," Victoria said. "Cheerfully," they said, in the same moment. A beat. Then Osei smiled, the involuntary kind, the kind that grief sometimes produces when memory ambushes it with something that is both painful and exactly right. "Cheerfully," he said. "Yeah." She found the photograph table in the corner of the suite where Caroline had set it up. The same framed images from the officers' club the night before, moved here when the family decided the officers' club was finished for them. She stood in front of it. No one grabbed her arm this time. No phones came up, no voices challenged. No one put their certainty between her and the photographs. She stood there for the time she needed. She looked at Danny's grinning face, the redacted figures beside him, the beach somewhere, the light wrong for California, the quality of it suggesting East Africa or maybe Southern Europe, one of the theaters that appeared on no public map of their operational history. She put her fingers at the edge of the frame. She thought, the punchline is, because at least the Navy doctor knows which end is the patient. She thought, you impossible, card-cheating, joke-hoarding man. She stood there until she was done standing there, which was about 4 minutes, which was probably longer than anyone in the room expected, and shorter than she needed but was what was available. Then she stepped back. The calls started the following Tuesday. Marsh called first, at 7:42 in the morning, and her voice was different. The taut compression of the weekend was gone, replaced by something steadier, the tone of someone who has been working a continuous thread and has just reached a specific point in it. Caulfield's attorney contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office this morning, Marsh said. He's offering cooperation. Victoria was in her apartment, a rented place in Oceanside, 30 minutes north of Coronado, the kind of apartment that was functional and impersonal and suited her precisely because of that. She was standing in the kitchen with coffee and the window showing a strip of Pacific and gray morning sky. Cooperation meaning what? She said. Meaning he'll provide testimony against Viridian's board-level decision-makers in exchange for a negotiated plea on the financial fraud counts. Marsh paused. He's rolling on them. Will it hold? His attorney knows what the material shows. He's not negotiating from a strong position. Another pause. Victoria, the internal communications from Meridian that we pulled, Kwan's communications specifically, they established the chain clearly. Who told him? What he reported upward? What instructions came back down? She stopped. The instructions that came down after Haas's information reached them, they're not ambiguous about what they wanted done about Rourke. The kitchen was very quiet. They ordered it, Victoria said. The language is careful. It always is. But the interpretation is not complicated. Marsh's voice was steady, professional, and underneath it something that was controlled because it needed to be. We're referring the Rourke matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal review. That decision was made this morning. Victoria put her coffee down. She pressed her palm flat on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, feeling the cool surface against her hand. Danny had died on a land navigation course with no witnesses. He had been alone on a hillside in the dark, doing a thing he'd done hundreds of times without error, and someone had decided that the information he carried was worth more than his life. What's the timeline on that review, she said. Criminal matters move separately from the fraud case. Could be months before charges. Marsh paused. But it's being looked at, Victoria. Formally. On the record. With the material from the case supporting it. Okay, she said. Are you all right? I'm working on it, she said. She picked up her coffee and looked out at the strip of Pacific. Hollis called at 9:15. His voice had a different texture than it had in the conference room. Less defended, more direct, the sound of a man who has been carrying a case for 8 months and felt it shift into a different gear overnight. Caulfield's cooperation agreement covers 3 counts of federal fraud. 1 count of unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence, he said. In exchange, he's provided the identity of his primary contact at Viridian, board member named Richard Sorrell, Chief Strategy Officer. Sorrell, Victoria said.
Sure.
He was the architect of the intelligence acquisition program. Built it from inside Viridian starting in 2011. He identified Caulfield as a vulnerability while Caulfield was still on the oversight committee, cultivated the relationship over 2 years before the first transaction. Sorrell is being charged. Arrested this morning, Hollis said. Northern Virginia Field Office. His attorney was notified simultaneously with the arrest. A pause. There are 4 additional Viridian board members under investigation. The company's publicly traded status is currently suspended pending Securities and Exchange Commission review. She let that settle. Viridian Strategic Solutions. The company that had bought mission intelligence generated by operators who never knew their work was being monetized. The company that had run a subsidiary employing the daughter of the investigator building the case against them. The company that had almost certainly made a decision about Daniel Rourke in the language of people who dealt in information and consequences as units of currency. Its publicly traded status was suspended. Its chief strategy officer was in federal custody. Its contractor subsidiaries were being audited. The colonel, Victoria said, Haas's former chain. He's been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, Hollis said. We believe he received a payment, indirect, through a consulting arrangement, that motivated his dismissal of Haas's report. If that's proven, it's obstruction at minimum. And the archive pulls? Who ran them? Kwan's communications reference a contact at the Defense Intelligence Agency. We're in that process now. DIA cooperation is, Hollis chose his words, being negotiated at the agency level. Meaning someone doesn't want to hand over their own. Meaning it's complicated, Hollis said. But we'll get there. She looked at her kitchen window. The Pacific, the gray sky above it, the ordinary horizontal line of the water meeting the world. Hollis, she said. Yes, the people from the unit, the operators whose intelligence was sold without their knowledge. They need to be told what happened. That's a sensitive matter, given the classification.
I know it's sensitive, she said. I'm not asking for a press release. I'm asking that the people who generated the material that was stolen be told, through appropriate channels, what was done with it. They deserve that. A pause. I'll raise it with the U.S. attorney, he said. I'd appreciate it. She hung up and stood in her kitchen and looked at the water.
The call she'd asked Marsh to arrange came on Thursday. Not a single call. A conference call set up through a secure channel that Hollis's office facilitated, with 7 former operators who had served in the unit during the operational window. Some she knew. Some she didn't. All of them had seen some version of the news by then. Viridian's suspension had been covered in defense industry trade publications, if not the mainstream press, and people who knew what to look for had looked. She told them. Not everything. Not the operational details, not the specific mission outputs that had been sold, because those remained classified and would remain so for years. But the shape of it, the structure, the fact of what had been done. The call was mostly quiet on the other end while she talked. She could hear the specific quality of people listening in the way you listen to something you suspected but didn't confirm. The sound of a suspicion being validated, which is not satisfying in the way that people imagine before it happens. When she finished, one of them, a man named Tran, who she'd served with directly, who had been the best land navigator the unit ever produced, which was a particular kind of irony she was trying not to think about, said, "Who else knows?" "Federal investigators," she said. "The people who need to." "It'll be public?" "The fraud case will be public. The unit's specifics won't. Your names won't." She paused. "You won't get official acknowledgement. That's not how this ends." Silence. "Did Danny know it was coming?" Tron asked. The question underneath the question was obvious, and she answered both. "He found it, he preserved the material, and he died before he could finish what he started," she said. "Someone made a decision about him. That decision is being reviewed as a criminal matter." More silence. "He was the best land navigator I ever saw," Tran said. He was saying it about Rourke, who had died on a land navigation course. The specific weight of that was in the silence that followed it. "I know," Victoria said. The call ended 14 minutes after it started. She sat with the phone in her hand. She thought about Danny on a hillside in the dark. She thought about the document that had killed him, and the drive that had saved the document, and the letter that had saved the drive, and the chain of careful, deliberate protection he had built when he understood what was happening to him. He had been methodical to the end. She supposed she wasn't surprised. She went back to the base on Friday, not for anything official. There was nothing official for her there, no debriefing scheduled, no formal function. Hollis's office had told her she'd be contacted when deposition preparation began, and that was weeks away. She went because she hadn't finished, and she knew it. She drove through the gate with her civilian ID and the base access that her record still technically conferred, one of the peripheral benefits of a separation that hadn't included a full administrative severance. And she parked in the lot near the chapel and walked across the base to the officers' club. It was a Friday morning. The club was quiet. The reception space from last Friday had been restored to its normal configuration. Round tables, neutral linens, no memorial photographs, no flowers, the whole shape of the space returned to its institutional default as if nothing had happened in it. The memorial table was gone. Of course it was gone. She stood in the doorway of the empty reception space for a moment, looking at where the table had been. A voice behind her said, "Ms. Kane?" She turned. Commander Weston was standing in the corridor, in uniform, with the particular expression of a man who has processed a significant quantity of the last week's events and is still not entirely sure what to do with the remainder. "Commander," she said, "I saw you come through the gate." He paused. I owe you an apology for Friday night. I should have pushed harder on the verification before it went where it went." She looked at him. "You made the call," she said. "Eventually. It took too long." "Yes," she said. "It did." She let him have that because he deserved to have it without being absolved of it prematurely. "But you made it." He nodded. Not relieved, still carrying it, but acknowledged. "Lieutenant Commander Holt submitted his resignation yesterday," he said. She didn't say anything. "Pending the formal review outcome, but he submitted it voluntarily."
Weston paused.
I don't know if that matters to you. It matters that the process happened, she said. Whether or not he stayed is his choice to make. Weston looked at the empty reception space. Were you... he started. Stopped. Are you looking for something? Can I help with anything? She looked at the space where the table had been, the ordinary tables and chairs, the neutral room. No, she said. I think I'm done. He nodded. She walked out. Outside, the base was doing its Friday morning operations. Vehicles moving, personnel in various uniforms going between buildings, the whole functional ecology of a military installation in peacetime, which was not quite peace but was the nearest available approximation. She walked to the parking lot. She got almost to her car. Then she stopped. She turned and looked back at the base. The buildings, the bay visible in the distance past the flight line, the specific quality of light on a California morning that was doing what California mornings do, which is make everything look like it was designed to be looked at. She thought about Trevor Haas, who had sat on a bench on the boardwalk and handed her an envelope and looked like a man setting down something heavy. She thought about Garrett, who had driven from Phoenix at midnight and bought a sweatshirt with the tag still on it and gone home on Tuesday in time for his daughter's birthday, which he'd told her about afterward in a text that said only, "She played the cello badly with genuine commitment." Sound familiar? She thought about Petra, who had charged them for equipment use and made them sandwiches and done the work cleanly and efficiently without once asking more questions than the job required. She thought about Caroline Rourke, who had hugged her at the door of a hotel suite and said, "He talked about you. More than he talked about most people." She thought about Osei at the window, saying cheerfully in the same moment she did. She thought about Nathan Cross saluting in a hallway at 11 o'clock at night after leaving his daughter's cello recital. She thought about Daniel Rourke on a beach somewhere with redacted people on either side of him, grinning at a camera with the specific expression of a man who is in on something that has not happened yet and is already looking forward to it. She stood in the parking lot in the California light, and she let herself feel the weight of what the last week had been, which was considerable, and she felt it without managing it for approximately 45 seconds, which was longer than she usually allowed. Then she got in the car. She called Marsh from the highway going north. "The deposition prep," she said when Marsh picked up. "When it starts, I want to know everything I'm going to be asked before I walk into the room." "That's standard," Marsh said. "We'll prep you fully." "And the Rourke Criminal Review. I want to be kept informed, not as a resource, as someone who has standing to know." A pause. "I'll make sure of it." "One more thing," Victoria said. "Yes, Trevor Haas. He took a significant risk going to a colonel with this. That colonel is now under investigation. Haas's career could be collateral damage from the review. Haas is active duty. His situation will be, make sure it's handled right," Victoria said. "He did everything correctly. He went through proper channels, got dismissed, tried another route, and handed what he had to the right person. That's the system working the way it's supposed to work. The outcome shouldn't punish him for the system's other failures." Marsh was quiet for a moment. "I'll make a note," she said. "Officially. Thank you." She drove north. The highway ran along the coast and the ocean was on her left, the wide Pacific doing its impassive Pacific thing, and the morning was clear and the traffic was light for a Friday, and the radio was off because she didn't need it. She thought about what came next. Not for the case. That would move at the speed of federal processes, which was slow and uneven and would frustrate her in the months ahead and produce results she'd be able to live with even when those results were incomplete. That was the nature of it. Justice through institutions is a grinding thing, not a clean one, and you did not do it for the satisfaction of watching it work because the satisfaction was always partial and usually late. You did it because partial and late was better than nothing. You did it because Danny Rourke had preserved a drive in a waterproof case in a storage unit and written 3 paragraphs in his tilted handwriting and trusted that the right person would find them. You did it because the people in the unit had generated the material that had been sold, and they deserved someone to stand in a room and say, "This happened, and it was wrong, and someone is being held to account." You did it because not doing it was not an option that Victoria Kane had ever been able to access, and she'd tried in the years since she separated to find it. The version of herself that could walk away from a thing when the thing required walking toward, and it didn't exist. She'd made her peace with that. She drove. The ocean kept pace with her on the left. She thought about going back to what she'd been doing, the work she'd built in the last 3 years, quiet and unremarkable in hers, helping veterans navigate the specific bureaucratic labyrinth of a system that was supposed to serve them and often didn't. Documentation, benefits, appeals, the slow, unglamorous work of making sure that people who had given significant portions of their lives to an institution that would not acknowledge their specific contributions could at least access the general ones. She was good at it, not because it was dramatic or because it involved the skills she'd spent 12 years developing in operational environments, because it required patience and precision and a specific refusal to accept the first answer when the first answer was wrong, and those were skills that had no expiration date and no classification level. She thought about going back to it. She decided she was already going back to it. The work would be there Monday morning. The stack of files on her desk at the Veterans Advocacy Office in Oceanside, the appointments scheduled, the appeals in progress, the people who needed someone in the room with them who understood both sides of the institutional language and could translate without losing meaning. That was enough. It was, in fact, more than enough. It was the thing she'd chosen, after everything, and choosing it again now, in the specific context of the last week, with the full weight of what had happened and what had been cost and what had been recovered, felt different than it had before. Cleaner, more deliberate. Not because she was at peace with all of it, she wasn't. Danny was dead, and the process would take months, and Caulfield would negotiate a plea that would be less than what his decisions had cost, and the archive access that had identified Rourke as a threat would eventually be traced to someone at DYA, and that person's consequences would be determined by agencies with interests in managing their own exposure. None of that was clean, but the material was in the right hands. The case was in motion. 7 people on a conference call had heard the truth about what had been done with their work. A drive in a waterproof case had made it from El Cajon to a federal evidence room, which was exactly what Danny had built it to do. He had trusted her to finish it. She had finished it. She drove north and the ocean was there, and the morning was there, and the strip of highway was there unrolling in front of her, and she let it all be what it was, imperfect and insufficient and true, without trying to make it into something more resolved than it actually was. That was, she had learned, the most honest relationship you could have with anything that mattered. You did the work. You did it when it cost you. You documented everything, and you trusted the chain you could trust, and you accepted that the chain would sometimes fail, and you built redundancies, and you handed the box to the right person, and you wrote the letter. And then you drove home on a Friday morning with the ocean on your left, and you made a plan to be at your desk on Monday, and you let the rest of it be someone else's job because you had done yours. She had done hers. 3 months later, the Veridian Strategic Solutions fraud case was indicted on 11 federal counts. Warren Caulfield entered a plea agreement. Richard Sorrell was charged with 6 counts, including conspiracy to commit unauthorized disclosure of classified information. The company's federal contracting status was suspended pending resolution. The criminal review of Daniel Rourke's death resulted in charges of second-degree murder and conspiracy filed against 2 individuals, a former Veridian security officer and a mid-level operative whose name had appeared in Kwan's communications 3 days before the training accident. The colonel who had dismissed Haas's report was found to have received $47,000 through a consulting arrangement with a Veridian subsidiary. He was charged with obstruction and forced to retire. Trevor Haas received a commendation from his wing commander for demonstrating integrity in reporting suspected misconduct through proper channels. His service record reflected it. Victoria was not at any of the hearings. She was at her desk in Oceanside, working through a stack of appeals for veterans whose claims had been denied, making calls and writing letters, and doing the slow, unglamorous, essential work of making sure that people who had given what they'd given could access what they'd been promised. She was good at it. She was still doing it. And the ocean was a 15-minute drive from her desk, and sometimes on a clear afternoon she went and stood at the water's edge and let the Pacific be as large as it was, which was very large, and let the sound of it replace for a little while the sound of everything else. She never did find a version of the card-cheating joke that worked as well as Danny's, but she tried it on Ose once, at a gathering the following spring that was less sad than the one the previous fall, and he laughed, and she thought that probably meant she'd gotten the spirit of it right, even if the words weren't exact. Spirit was what held. Longer than documents, longer than records, longer than the institutional language that organizations use to describe the people who serve them. You did the work. You built something, and when the institution failed to protect what you'd built, you protected it yourself. Not with weapons, not with authority, but with patience and precision and the specific refusal to let the truth be buried under the weight of whoever found it inconvenient. That was the only armor that lasted. That was the only thing they couldn't classify.